across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's Jonathan Gullis sitting here in for the mighty Alex Phillips this morning with you from 10 a.m. all the way through to 1 p.m. And haven't we got a great show for you? This is Talk. This is the home of common sense. And I want to make sure you are giving us your views, your opinions on whether it's about what you think about today's doctors' strikes that we're seeing up and down the country, what you think about the protests over migrant hotels in Epping, whether or not you think anything can stop Reform UK, and tell us what you think about the situation with Jeremy Corbyn and Zara Sultana launching their new political party. Is this the death nail for the Labour Party and Sir Keir Starmer? Well, you know how they get in touch with us. 0344 499 1000. You can text us, call us on that number, or indeed WhatsApp. You can also text us on 87222, but please start your message with the word talk at the beginning, and follow and message us on X at talkTV. We will go now to our first great guest. He is the Deputy Political Editor of The Spectator and friend of us here on Talk. He is Mr. James Hill. Hello, James. How are you?
I'm good, thank you, John. Thank you for asking.
No, but lovely to have you on. And if I can start, James, with the story in The Spectator, and we've seen some punchy pieces over recent weeks about Kevin Badenoch, but today's in The Spectator, we've now seen the Can Anything Stop Reform UK and Nigel Farage, written by political editor Tim Shipman. The piece, just so for those of you who haven't and listeners read it, talks a lot about Nigel work ethic. Nigel Farage is now apparently doing 4:30 a.m. to 11 p.m. each and every day. I suspect that's been put in there because there's always been criticism about Nigel's attention to detail and work ethic. Lots of apparently secret phone calls with civil servants volunteering to help set up Reform UK for government. We've got the 6-week Lawless Britain campaign underway, and we know that there is shock within Reform UK that the polls are sticking, and that Nigel still doesn't really want to be Prime Minister, but feels he has a moral sense of duty to do so. James, do you think Nigel Farage really doesn't want to be Prime Minister, or is that just him trying to sound like it's being forced upon him rather than always desiring it, much like Boris Johnson used to say?
I do think there is this slight doubt of hesitation in Nigel Farage's mind. You can see that in the interviews he's done. There was one with Christopher Hope of GB News last year, which he said 3 times he refused to say he wanted to be Prime Minister. You can see it, for instance, in his 2015 book, The Purple Revolution, where he says, I never want to be Prime Minister, I'm not going to form a government, I won't make my own cabinet. But of course, the polls now will point to that. So I do think there is this doubt in his mind. I was speaking to one of Nigel's most senior advisors a few months ago, and I said, does he want to be Prime Minister? And he said, yes, but. And the yes, but is so crucial, of course, as you'll know, Jonathan, because if you want to be Prime Minister, you have to want to go out there and kill it 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, for years and years and years. It can drive you mad, that pursuit of the premiership. So I do think that Nigel Farage does want it, but whether he wants it enough will be the key question we have to tease out over the next 4 years. I will say, though, as it gets more and more likely, of course, he spent 30 years tramping around the country, making Euroscepticism a big thing, etc. That, I think, is hardening. And so it's gone from being an unrealistic possibility to a very realistic one, and that's crystallising in his thinking too.
Well, I think we'll see that, like you say, James, in May 2026, where we have elections both in Wales and Scotland. Wales, where Reform are currently polling on course to be the largest party, yet probably still short of a majority. Scotland, where they could even come potentially in second in front of Labour, which I think really would make everyone's mouths draw and jaws drop. And then, of course, elections, but this time predominantly within England, not in Tory bluer Shire areas, but this time in the urban metropolitan Labour strongholds, where out of about 3,300 councillors, Labour's defending 2,200. Obviously, we've seen now Jeremy Corbyn and Zara Sultana announced they are launching a party, albeit we went from your party to that's not your party's name. That is going to be decided by those who join it. And Zara Sultana boasting that within by Thursday evening, 80,000 people have signed up. I see Claudia Webb, ex-Labour Member of Parliament, strong ally of Jeremy Corbyn, is now claiming 190,000 as of this morning on her feed on X. James, how serious do we take this as a threat to Labour, and how much is this a gift as well to Nigel Farage?
It certainly is a threat. And you mentioned there the local elections next year. Of course, the two ones I'll be looking out for are the two biggest cities in England, London and in Birmingham as well. And you'd expect to see a Corbyn-led party potentially making some gains there. Obviously, you think about last year, or you think about some of those Gaza independents doing very well in Birmingham. So you think that's something to watch out for if this new party is able to get a lot of those kind of voters behind them. I do think it's a threat to Labour. And polls suggest that if they're organised, that's 10%, even if, and it doesn't look like they're getting much organised at the moment, but even if they got half of that, that would still be a serious chunk. You've got to remember, of course, that Labour's election victory last year was one of the most efficient we've ever seen. They were able to win seats with small majorities, win a huge number of seats on a very low vote share, 33%. And of course, anything that takes a chunk out of that potentially can be a game changer. So I do think Farage stands to benefit from this. Although I would also point out an interesting point, which is that, people in Reform are making the argument that even ex-Green voters are going there. So I do think there's something about the anti-establishment populist feeling. Some of it applies to Reform, but also to this new party as well. It's all about how you can get as many votes in your columns. But overall, in a fractured landscape against a divided Labour Party, that bodes very well for Reform, who on 30% could make up a majority government.
What I find interesting is Zach Polanski, who's one of those running for the leadership of the Green Party, I believe 1st of August is when that election will take place, has said that he would be up for a, as he's called it, a green-red alliance with a Corbyn-led new party. Jeremy Corbyn interviewed today, I think he's down in Birmingham on the picket lines with protesters over the bin strikes in solidarity, as he would say, with the bin workers who face, in some cases, losing up to £8,000 as reported. Jeremy Corbyn has also kind of left the door open, certainly inferred that he would be up for an alliance too. Again, is that just smart political manoeuvring? And also, as you say, in an era of when authenticity is more important than ever, whatever people think of Jeremy Corbyn, you can't say he's anything other than authentic, having been very strong in his views and stringent in espousing them for many decades now.
Absolutely. And I mean, Jeremy Corbyn, of course, had a huge number of volunteers in his Islington North constituency last year, despite the Labour Party really trying to get him out of that seat. And he has a following. He's a following in terms of left-wing members, activists, people, ordinary voters, some of them watching and listening to this. He has a following, and that will take a chunk. The key thing, of course, is about how you can kind of have an organisational force. And we've seen in recent history examples of pacts that haven't worked. You think 2019, there were attempts to get the sort of Lib Dems, the Greens, all to stand in certain areas as part of a sort of rejoin, a Remainer alliance, and that backfired terribly. So the key thing is, of course, is about, are you on the key side of big questions? We don't know what the next big election is going to be. The questions will be, will it be anyone but Farage? Will it be a sort of entente cordiale, a cordon sanitaire, where you get all the left-wing parties trying to stop Farage, as they see it, the far right, etc.? Or will it be anti-Labour? And if it's anti-Labour, then you can definitely see a sort of left-wing party potentially making chunks there. And I will be really interested to see how the Green leadership vote goes, because, of course, Polanski's running as a sort of left-wing populist, etc. Adrian Ramsey, who's the current co-leader, is very much saying, look, we've got the other lot doing this now. We've got Sultana and Corbyn. If we do this, we're going to lose our USP. So we should actually stick with the kind of moderate environmentalism that he's espousing.
Yes, because Adrian Ramsey is one of those who won a parliamentary seat off the Conservatives. I think, in fact, and two gains were actually made off Conservatives for the Greens when it came to the 2024 general election. And Adrian Ramsey was seen as very much crucial to sort of appealing much more to those kind of blue wall areas where people maybe have a bit more of a comfortable lifestyle and therefore can spend more time dreaming that net zero somehow the horizon in the distance, that they want to believe it. Although, James, I think you and I both know my views very much on that. I believe net zero belongs in the bin. But of course, obviously, that will be a big challenge. And we saw that very awkward exchange on a rival network between Zach Polanski and Adrian Ramsey, where Adrian Ramsey refused repeatedly to say whether he even liked Zach Polanski. So all may not be good inside the Green tent. Going back to Tim's piece in The Spectator, James, we've also got the fact that Labour, apparently, Morgan McSweeney, Chief of Staff, and sort of now becoming infamous with the British public, is very much trying to model himself, it feels like, slightly on Dominic Cummings under the last Conservative government. Apparently he's got three things that he's going to focus on. Number one is the restructure of 10 Downing Street. They're very annoyed that the person Keir Starmer hired to be head of the civil service is apparently a blocker, not a reformer. Well, Keir Starmer should have figured that out. I think there were plenty of warning signs in advance. There's the big conference speech, of course, which comes up ahead of Rachel Reeves's much anticipated budget and the need to, quote, tell a story. I don't know if storytelling is going to get away from the fiscal reality that she's going to have to display. And then, of course, there's also going to be this sort of, well, not a quango, but let's say the office of Prime Minister. So the party that wants to slim down government is going to set up an office deliberately to bypass the Cabinet Secretary. And Helen McNamara is someone who used to be seen as a very good person internally within the civil service world, looking to make a return to frontline politics. This is going to be reset number, I've lost count. Are these things going to save Sir Keir Starmer, or is it just that no one's being honest in the Labour Party and actually Sir Keir Starmer's the problem?
I think Keir Starmer is the problem. I mean, when it comes back to issues like choosing the Cabinet Secretary, he had the choice. And what did he choose? He chose not someone who was just a sort of nepo baby, not an hereditary civil servant. His grandfather was a top civil servant. His father was a civil servant. He was someone who's been the longest-serving permanent secretary of a department in Whitehall for more than a decade. He chose the embodiment of the establishment status quo. And now he's surprised when he's a blocker. I mean, this was obvious at the time. And so I think that, you know, Chris Wormold, I feel a bit sorry for him because he only knows what he's doing. And of course, so that's one issue about personality. The second thing about, you know, there's been lots of discussion about the Prime Minister having a permanent department for years. It's been proposed, maybe taking some of the Cabinet Office. People point out that the Prime Minister, it's crazy when you have these discussions. There's a tiny lot in number 10 versus, say, for instance, thousands of people, 3,000 people in the Treasury, for instance, next door, you know, massive departments and things at the Home Office. No kind of institutional counterbalance to that. My only observation would be that I was listening the other day to a talk by Anthony Seldon, the great sort of biographer of a lot of British prime ministers. He made the point that there were a lot less civil servants in Margaret Thatcher's number 10 ever since there's been this huge sort of expansion of number 10, and actually the quality's got worse and worse. So it's about getting high quality, high caliber people, as well as sort of making sure you have the institutional heft behind you. Will it be enough to save him? I'm not sure. I think it can certainly improve him, and I certainly think there's a path open, as I've discussed before with you, Jonathan, about how if the right is split, if there's kind of 30-35% of the vote, they could definitely turn it around. But he definitely needs to sharpen up his game and also, yeah, find that story and also work out what a Labour government can do. The central question of this government is, what does a Labour government do when there's no money left? There is no more money to spend. What can they do? Think creatively, a bit of institutional stuff, but overall it's a pretty grim picture for them.
Last night we had a lot of by-elections up and down the country. We saw the Conservative Party new chairman Kevin Hollinrake celebrating, I think, 2 Conservative holds in Dorset as well as a Conservative gain on some town council. It shows you how far the Conservatives have fallen when they're cheering on gains from Labour on a town council. And then, of course, you've got holds in areas like Lichfield. Not long ago, Staffordshire overwhelmingly voted for reform, albeit that ward that the Conservative held onto sits within a Conservative-held county council seat. So I think it's important context there. But still, we saw Reform UK making huge strides in places like Cardiff, where Labour had 54 out of the 70-plus councillors on the council, and Chris Bryant applauding it as if somehow that's some big victory when they lost their vote share, went down by 17%. We also see as well that Reform UK did indeed gain a seat over in Bromley. And you, James, have shared a tweet which Miss Badenoch is probably now regretting having posted, which shows that she was actually out on polling day alongside Peter, her parliamentary colleague for that area, fighting hard for the by-election, which ended up being a Reform gain off the Conservatives. I think we might have that image, and if we do, we'll shove it up on the screen shortly. But James, obviously this is a tough week for Kemi Badenoch to have been front and centre of a local election campaign, which they didn't hold on to. We saw the long read in the New Statesman that was quite brutal, I must say, a character assassination from almost birth to current status as leader of the Conservative Party. We're seeing it open more and more now. Donors anonymously, members of Parliament anonymously, party members anonymously, so that's still probably the lifesaver for at the moment, but it's seemingly feeling and increasingly likely that when that 1 year anniversary arrives and her 1 year of being free from being challenged as leader comes up, there is going to be letters going in, I can assume. And I'm assuming conversations from parliamentary Conservatives that you've spoken to is that she's on borrowed time. Yeah, I think that I've already spoken to several MPs who've told me they'll be submitting letters when that deadline is up. So I think that she will face a very difficult time. Obviously, the big thing everyone's looking to now is the conference season, and it will obviously be a difficult one for her. She told the 1922 committee last week
that 98, of course, 1998 was the first full year after they lost government in 97, was much worse than 97, of course, because back then you had the sort of bromide of a leadership campaign. You still had sort of ministers or ex-ministers being followed around by their former officials and advisors. That will all be gone. It'll be a very bleak conference this year. And of course, Reform will be in party mood, and they'll have a party in September. 4 weeks later, it's Kemi Badenoch's term and the Tories. And I think it'll be an unfortunate contrast. And yes, she was out yesterday in Bromley, an area that's always been pretty good for the Conservatives. And I do think that a lot of Tories now are feeling very nervous. It's a good piece in the Evening Standard today by Aaron Newbury, talking about the fact that, actually the machine is sort of rotting away. In 2018, every different area of London, all 32 boroughs, had a campaign manager. Now it's down by about 3/4 of that. There just isn't the machinery. And given, as I've said on this discussion today, Jonathan, about the importance of organisation, if you can't organise and you've got an elderly greying voter base and campaign organisation, that means it's really going to struggle.
Well, like you say, all London boroughs, all 32, will have all-out elections in May next year. The Conservatives, obviously, in the sort of, as they would call it, the donut, have always had relatively good and strong representation. There is a very genuine fear right now, from what I can see, of that collapsing. And obviously, if you're losing in places like London as well as losing in the Shires, it will not be a good sign. James, I also note that in that piece as well by Tim Shipman of The Spectator, political editor, sorry, just for listeners' sake, that he has said that Nigel Huddleston and Lord Dominic Johnson, both who used to be the co-chairs before the reshuffle, were apparently on the verge of resigning, saying that basically they were sick of taking the hits, as it were, for things that were nothing to do with them nor their fault. I mean, that's quite extraordinary that that kind of briefing is going out there, and it shows that, as you say, the internal CCHQ machine, it must be in trouble, no?
Yeah, absolutely. And look, in opposition, there are very few ways to demonstrate your competence for government. One thing you always do is demonstrate you can change your party and then change the country. Keir Starmer was very good at that. Kemi Badenoch has a real challenge in that. And I have some sympathy with her, because you think about the issues she came in on day one. There was still the legacy of the betting investigation that was going on. There was still lots of talk about who was in donating and who wasn't. She had to smooth over things with the rival candidates. But that being said, it certainly is not a happy place. And I think that it's going to be very difficult to see. Yes, they've had some good luck with donations. Yes, they've still got some institutional knowledge. But it's difficult going to see how that compares when you've now got this new competitor on the right. And frankly, everyone I speak to in CCHQ and in the Conservative Party is, how do we stop reform? And right now, with polls giving them 30%, it doesn't look like they found the answer yet. And
interestingly, party members that are lots of WhatsApp groups that I'm in, 2/3 of them were saying that that recent reshuffle was the return of the wets, was the most common phrase that I was seeing in WhatsApp groups there. So I think more challenges on the horizon. And James, before we let you go, obviously, doctor strike will be the big news today. Doctors, junior doctors, or resident doctors, sorry, now, should I say, are on the picket line for 5 days, demanding a 29% pay increase. There will be obviously criticism that this government handed over a 22% pay rise when they came in, and people would say, we warned you that if you're going to give such substantial pay rises, the unions will always come back and ask for more. Earlier on here on Talk, Mike Graham had one such one doctor on, demanding to find out what she was earning, and she quite bluntly refused to answer that question. So that probably doesn't bode well when it comes to trying to gain more public sympathy. As we know, public support for these strikes is down around 33%, much lower than it has been historically before. But interesting that we see in other publications, Keir Starmer writing in the Times today, a very punchy letter where urging hospitals to not cancel routine operations as part of and in order to make sure that we don't go down this damaging road, warning that it would be a blight the lives of patients and cause real damage. He said our NHS and country need you. And then Wes Streeting, seemingly apparently wanting to, in a letter that's been seen by the Telegraph, wanting to break the British Medical Association. Wes Streeting, to his credit, I think has been all over this and actually quite punchy, and not kind of, you certainly can't accuse him of being a union payboy with the way he's been speaking to the BMA. So do you think the government will emerge with some credit here for at least standing up to these unions, and do you think the unions will fail, or do we think that Keir Starmer is going to go weak at the knees and he's going to capitulate, and then Rachel Reeves is going to have an even further black hole to fill?
I think that it's going to end badly for both. I mean, the BMA's attitude on this, it really is living up to what Nye Bevan said about stuffing their mouths with gold when he was founding the NHS. The BMA is not being helpful. They're not an officially Labour-affiliated union like some unions are, like Unite, for instance, but they've always been seen as someone who'd be more helpful and favourable to Labour. And, of course, in opposition, Labour was very much cheering on their demands. So now we've come in, gave them this a massive initial pay rise. I believe that £2 in every £3 that is going to the NHS since last year in additional funding is on salaries rather than, for instance, hospital improvements. And they've tried to be the union's friend, and it's just proven not to be the case. And so the BMA are giving out these extraordinary quotes, demanding 29%, etc., writing really punchy, unhelpful letters. And I think it'll damage the government's standing and competence. And their one big bet when it came to industrial policy was, we'll be better than the Tories. We understand the unions. We're not Thatcher's children, etc. And turns out people are rational and respond to rational incentives and demands. And frankly, they want the money and they can sense weakness. And so I think they're going to keep damaging the government's relations on industrial policy and damage their own standing, but they don't care because they want the money.
James Hill, Deputy President of The Spectator, thank you so much for joining us here on Talk. Well, listeners, there you've had a broad range of stories, but what I want to know, how do you feel about doctors striking today? Are you on their side, or are you saying that they should lower their expectations and get into the real world? You can make sure you can tell us your views by calling in 0344 499 1000. You can also WhatsApp us on that message too, or text in 87222 with the word talk at the start of your message, or follow and message us on X at talkTV. We'll see you after the break.
If you want to know what's really wrong with this country, fundamentally the decision was taken beginning in the 1960s to abolish the idea of personal responsibility, to explain all crime as some kind of reaction to bad social conditions or abuse or whatever it might be, and to cease to enforce law as law is to cease to get rid of the old concept of punishment. As it were, the working maxim of the prison system in this country used to be the due punishment of responsible persons.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning, everybody. It's Jonathan Gullis sitting in for the fantastic Alex Phillips here on the home of common sense. That is Talk. And we've been getting your texts and calls coming, and we're going straight to our first caller, Laura Jane in Hampshire, who wants to talk about the junior doctor strike. Hello, Laura Jane. How are you?
Hi there. What I wanted to say was, having listened to a clip at the news before this last news, one of the junior doctors was mentioning that he had to pay £500 for his exams. And that sort of brought me on to the fact that I do feel, well, one, I don't think they should be paying for their exams. I think, that's ridiculous. Unless they're, a foreign doctor paying to be trained here, that's different. But it just shows how broken the NHS is, that it needs a root and branch. It's not about giving money. It would be really interesting to get a doctor on who, unlike the one that poor Mike had to interview, who really couldn't string two sentences together, but perhaps to explain to us exactly how they're, what the training is, how their hours are, etc. And the same for, nurses, etc. I think the NHS is broken because the actual structure doesn't work anymore. And I don't feel sorry for the strikers. What I feel sorry for is the fact that I am absolutely sure, and we've all used A&E and things like that, it just doesn't work anymore. And the junior doctors are taking the rap at the moment. And I feel we should have go back to the old system where hospitals are responsible for their own finances, their own hiring, their own firing. And therefore, I live in Hampshire. My closest hospital is Winchester. I do have another small one in Andover. I could then choose which hospital I favour depending on their results. And we go back to having a matron who would be, some CEO medical person who has retired from being a doctor but has all the experience of running a department and then runs a hospital. It may sound old-fashioned, but it works better that way, having this huge body. And I mean, of course it can still be under the NHS. When the NHS started, that's what it was. Each hospital was responsible for its own finances as well. And I just feel very strongly that, that doctor just kicked me off, explaining me I had to pay £500. Imagine how many exams they do in the first few years of their training. It's not right. And he said he had over 100,000 in debt. I mean, my kids, they do have debt, but they didn't train to be doctors. And it's just outrageous. If we expect them to stay with us and not move abroad, we have got to look at the working conditions of a hospital and how does it work. Sorry, I'm on a roll.
No, that was an amazing call. Thank you so much, Laura Jane there from Hampshire. She wants to see the NHS go back to a more traditional, old-fashioned system and actually make sure that we have medical professionals making medical and professional decisions over the running of their hospitals, the hiring and the firing, and also the way in which wards are looked after. I think, Laura Jane, you're going to have a lot of people out there very sympathetic because, as we've seen, a bloated, backgrown bureaucracy has been taking place of our NHS. Around 50% of all NHS staff now are not clinicians on the front line. That seems to me like a total waste of taxpayers' money. And it is probably time to start considering, do we have a royal commission to take the politics out of it and actually to get common sense and allow experts to come in and tell us how we can look at models? Do we look at countries like France and Germany, or indeed Australia and Israel, where we've seen a mixture of both the public and the private sector collaboratively working together to bring about better long-term health results for their countries? I think, and I'll be keen to get your views on that. We've had some text coming in to Darren from Barnsley. Do people realise that a 29% increase for doctors on top of the 22% is equivalent to a 57.3% overall and not 49%? It looks like due to compound interest. Interesting there to point out. Another one here from Troy, who's in Suffolk. The junior doctors say they don't have enough to live on. Ask them how much they pay into their pension each month and how much the taxpayer contributes on top. Wes Streeting actually was putting out ideas about, do we shift some of the top up from the pension that the government will pay and actually move that into salary? So, for example, if a teacher, as has been conversed before, is about 26% contribution to their pension, if you reduce that by 10%, that 10% could go into a 10% pay rise and fund what's going on. Another text in here from Bill in Cheshire. Doctors pay again. My GP surgery is a big modern surgery with about 12 plus GPs, loads of nurses and other services. The car park has 12 spaces reserved for doctors. On any one day, there must be about £500,000 worth of cars parked in them. Just saying. Well, you have been saying what you think, and we want you to keep telling us what, because we want to be your voice here on the home of common sense, that is talk. So make sure you dial in 0344 499 1000. You can also WhatsApp on that message too, number 2. Message us on 87222 with the word talk at the start of your text, and follow and message us on X at talkTV. We'll see you shortly.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back, everybody. It's Jonathan Gullis sitting in for the great Alex Phillips here on Talk between 10 a.m. and 1 p.m. Make sure that on Talk, the home of common sense, you're telling us what you think on the issues. Call in 0344 499 1000. You can also WhatsApp us on that number too. Text in the word Talk at the start of your message to 87222 or follow us and message us on X at talkTV. Let's get to our next guest, Dr. Ashok Kumar, Associate Professor at Birkbeck University. Dr. Ashok, how are you doing?
Well, how are you doing?
I'm very good, thank you, and thank you for joining us today. I know we've got a couple of stories to cover. The first one being, obviously, Jeremy Corbyn launching this new party, some dubbing it Hard Left Party, others mocking the Your Party thing. I'm going to say, Dr. Ashok, I think the media were a bit unfair here. I never saw in any of the statements that I read that Jeremy Corbyn claims the party name to be Your Party. It was simply just a link to a website that people then jumped on and somehow tried to claim. So I'm going to defend Jeremy Corbyn here and say that that was a bit of mischief making from some in the Westminster lobby and those obviously on the right and centre-right of British politics. But more importantly, Zara Sultana, Jeremy Corbyn, no denying they are two very authentic politicians, very passionate in their views, very brave in standing up for what they believe in, whether people agree with it or not. Do you think this is a very serious threat for the Labour Party?
Well, that's very magnanimous of you, Jonathan. I think it's an honest assessment of the fact that your party was trying to indicate to everyone that this is a democratic participatory party that's going to be made from the ground up. And I think that if you look at the most recent polls, the new party, before it was even formed, polls had it at about 15%, the same proportion that they had the Labour Party. It's a real question of who the Labour Party even speaks to. You know, they collapsed their industrial base. They have no industrial policies that consistently bring forward austerity, consistently pro-war, even as a proportion of spending. So, you know, there's a real yearning for it. I mean, in the last 24 hours since a launching, there's 200,000 plus people who have signed on. That's, you know, dwarfs the Labour Party's membership, or rather the Green Party's membership, the Lib Dems and the Conservative Party's membership. So there's a real yearning and there's a real desire for this kind of politics that isn't speaking, no party really is speaking to that, with elements of the Green Party speaking to that. But the Greens obviously have their own issues. That's why there's so many people supporting this rather than the Greens. With
the Green Party, obviously, they're having a leadership election at this moment in time. There's the Adrian Ramsey, who's very much seen as a bit more of a moderate, trying to appeal to that traditional blue-tie Tory Shire area. And then there's Zach Polanski, being dubbed a left-wing populist, who is obviously, I would say, very much, it seems, aligned to the views of Jeremy Corbyn and Zara Sultana on many issues. Would you welcome, if Zach Polanski were elected as leader, some sort of alliance between the Green Party and this new party in order to make them a electoral force?
Yeah, I think Zach Polanski as leader is a progressive step. It also means that you have the possibility of a kind of red-green alliance where they don't compete against each other. You know, look, the Greens got second to Labour in dozens of seats. They get 5 to 7% in each seat across the country. People intuitively vote for the Greens in lots of places. It makes very little sense for a left-wing Green Party and a left-wing Zara/Corbyn party to be competing against each other. If they do have this kind of red-green alliance, which I think both Jeremy Corbyn, Zara Sultana, and Zach Polanski have indicated they'd be interested in, then you would have a serious contender against many of the mainstream parties that aren't competing against each other. And so, you know, I think that's a progressive step. I think there is a real problem right now, and the Greens have to come to terms with that they have had the opportunity for years, especially since 2019, to speak to this constituency of people as the Labour Party has abandoned their base. And they haven't made many inroads. You know, they poll maximum 10%, unfortunately, and in recent polls, polling at about 6%. So I think they have to come to terms with that. There's ex-Labour voters, there's voters in the industrial heartland, there's lots of Muslim voters, South Asian voters, that they've made some inroads, but not sufficiently enough. And I think that's where this new party can sort of take that space, and the Greens can take a different constituency, especially, like you said, places that like Adrian Ramsey represents, a much more sort of not an urban center that I think maybe the new party wouldn't have that many inroads in.
Do you think that we'll see campaigning style very much modelled on what we're seeing over in New York City for the mayor? I think it's Zohan, if I remember or said his name correctly, obviously securing the Democratic nomination for the mayor over there, and his competitor at the time, Andrew Cuomo, has seemingly apparently not given up the fight to try and become mayor alongside Eric Adams, and lots of talk in Republican circles that they'll step aside and privately back Eric Adams in order to try and stop Zohan from taking over. Obviously, he's been using social media very well. He's a young, dynamic person. I'm sure Zara Sultana will be looking to inject that same kind of energy with her huge following that she has across many social media platforms. But do you think, more importantly, Jeremy Corbyn was vilified by Sir Keir Starmer, used as a punch bag to tell the electorate we in Labour have changed? That seemingly did work in trying to convince voters to go back to Labour in the last general election, or is that just not matching reality when Sir Keir Starmer never got anywhere near as many votes as Jeremy Corbyn did, both in 2017 or 2019?
You're absolutely right. Look, I think that there was a real attempt to try and vilify and demonize that record, but it was demonstrably not the case at the ballot box. It was an election victory. Starmer's election victory was built on sand. In 2017, you had Jeremy Corbyn win the second largest number of votes in history for any Labour leader in British history, second only to Tony Blair in 1997. That was not repeated even anywhere nearly as close by Starmer, and Jeremy Corbyn won his election by a massive majority as an independent against Keir Starmer's, hand-selected Labour Party contender. The point is that if you look at, you use the example of Zoran Mamdani. Mamdani won not because he was, of course he's good on social media and he's very charismatic, but I think that's less of the issue. The more, important issue is that he contended with and made priority bread and butter issues that people wanted, free buses, childcare, rent freezes. The thing, people are struggling. There's a real cost of living problem across the Anglo-American world, across, the Western world, across the world. And if you're not dealing with those issues head on, then people are just either not going to be engaged or are not going to vote for you. So the new party will almost certainly, as they did even in 2017 and 2019, unfortunately 2019, there was, it was really a referendum on the people's vote, which was a disastrous decision that was made by Jeremy Corbyn. He may have lost anyways, that's not what I'm saying, but he wouldn't have lost by that proportion had it not been for that decision. But I think, it's by all indication, the new party is like hyper-focused on these bread and butter issues, and that's what will help them succeed.
Just to quote quickly, Mr. Corbyn and Ms. Sultana put out a joint statement which says, "The system is rigged when 4.5 million children live in poverty in the 6th richest countries in the world. The system is rigged when giant corporations make a fortune from rising bills. The system is rigged when the government says there is no money for the poor but billions for war. We cannot accept these injustices, and neither should you." Mr. Corbyn also made a point of saying that the reason the party was being set up is because they want to be a genuine force that takes on the, quote, dangerously divisive Nigel Farage. Ashok, there's going to be a huge amount of public opinion as well that Jeremy Corbyn himself is divisive. He's been seen as a friend of people who were formerly in the IRA. He called Hezbollah Friends a terrorist organisation. He's been obviously, people would say he'll pander to Islamist extremists that live in certain parts of our country in order to gain votes, very much what people call the Gaza independence. Isn't Jeremy Corbyn as divisive as Mr. Farage?
Well, divisive is a funny word, right? Because that's always bandied by people, usually in the center, to be honest, because taking a position, whatever you might think about Nigel Farage, whatever you might think about reform, you know where they stand. You know where they stand, and they take a position, and that's what's made them popular, right? People are yearning for something, and I think it's misdirected, and I think a lot of the country think it's misdirected to sort of blame migrants rather than blame the ruling class for why they have, issues at the kitchen table across the country. But at least you know where they stand. With Starmer, it's flip-flopping, it's mealy-mouthed, it's fence-sitting, it's status quo politics, and people have rejected that. So yes, call it divisive, call it polarizing. That's okay. Jeremy Corbyn, Zara Sultana, even reform, not to conflate the two at all, because actually, the left is about taxing the rich and distributing wealth and making sure the poor don't get, live in more destitution, and not to marginalize the already marginalized. But at least it's a position. And so the accusation of polarization and divisiveness is really made by status quo centrists who want to maintain everything as it is. And people are dissatisfied with that. That's why you see 200,000 people supporting this, and you see Reform being the largest party in the country. I'm not conflating the two, but I think polarization actually is not a problem. I think polarization is probably a healthy thing in a democratic society.
I mean, what I will say is that, again, Jeremy Corbyn is extremely authentic. No one can deny him that. And I think it is going to pose a serious threat to Labour. And I see loyalist Labour MPs out there trying to mock the way that the party so far unveiling itself. But I think they'll come to rue that day when they see their colleagues suffering from elections. Ashok,
I think you're absolutely right.
Ashok, can I just quickly say, you talk about the bread and butter issues. If we're talking about bread and butter issues, why does Ms Sultana and Mr Corbyn need to bang on then about Gaza? Why on earth does that matter to people around their kitchen table when they're facing a cost of living crisis?
Well, I mean, I think that people understand something that happens beyond themselves. They see every single day our country's complicity and active participation through surveillance over Gaza, through arms deals, etc., towards children that are being starved to death. 2.2 million people, half of them children in Gaza. When we talk about kitchen table politics, it's not just people just selfishly caring about their little corner of the world. When we talk about kitchen table politics, we say, are we prioritizing doubling the defense budget, as Starmer suggested, or actually funding the NHS, funding childcare, funding welfare, ensuring higher wages? It's not an either or. It's not that we can continue to support wars of aggression, genocide that's happening abroad and say, no, that has nothing to do with us. The vast majority of this country opposes our country's support for those war crimes. And so this division, to me, is a false one. Most people in this country look at the images of children being starved to death and say, we should not be contributing to that, and we should do everything in our power to try and stop that. And so we see, even in the election, when we talk about bread and butter issues, even in the last election, it's like the same government that's supporting Israel to do the actions that they're doing in Gaza is also cutting benefits and cutting services at home. There's not a division there. It's about priorities. And so what the new party's saying is, we oppose war. We oppose supporting wars through bulked up defense budgets and kowtowing to demands by Trump to increase our defense budget. And we support actually helping British people across the country. So those things are an aligned politics, and they actually speak to the majority in poll after poll of what the country believes.
Ashok, how on earth can you be anti-war when seemingly you're standing next to people with their placards on the hate marches, as I would call them, going through the streets of London, where they are basically saying that Hamas are some sort of freedom fighters? The fact is, this war began because Hamas decided to commit the largest genocide against the Jews since the Second World War. They still have over 50 hostages hidden in tunnels under Gaza. They're using the civilian population as human shields, as well as hospitals and schools, and whilst all their leaders are taking our aid that we've been giving for many years to live a cosy lifestyle in Qatari luxury penthouses, making sure that they don't have to face the bombs and the bullets, and actually using Hamas fighters to stop aid being given out to the people and hoarding it for themselves to use it as a control method. Hamas is the problem here. Israel is simply doing what it needs to do in order to try and ensure their safety and the long-term safety of the people of Gaza, surely.
Jonathan, these are such dated talking points. We were doing so well until this point.
It's not dated, Ashok, it's fact, isn't it? It's stated fact. Did Hamas commit a genocide in Israel?
There's no...
Did Hamas commit a genocide in Israel, Ashok?
They didn't commit a genocide in Israel.
So what did they do then? If they didn't commit a genocide, what did they do? What did they do if they didn't commit a genocide?
No independent organization, no international jurists have called it a genocide.
When you target Jewish people, what else is it called? When Hamas targeted Israeli people and killed over 1,400 innocent Israelis, what do you call it?
But to call it Jewish people is a direct violation of the IHRA's definition of anti-Semitism because you're conflating.
I'm not being anti-Semitic. I'm standing up for the Jewish population of Israel by saying that Hamas are Hamas terrorists. Then, Ashok, let's start there. Are Hamas terrorists?
Jonathan,
are Hamas terrorists? Yes or no?
They're legally defined as terrorists in this country.
Do you think they're terrorists? Do you think they're terrorists?
That is an insane question to ask someone in this country.
No, it's not. I'm asking, do you think they are? Yes or no? It's a simple question.
They are defined as terrorists.
No, but do you agree with the definition? Do you agree with the definition?
What's your definition of terrorism? Right now, what
Hamas would be the example.
I think Israel
terrorists who want to eradicate the Jewish state off the face of the earth and kill all Jews.
Let's talk about international law. Under international law, this is the additional protocols.
Ashok, this is where you lose sympathy with the public when you refuse to call Hamas terrorists.
Why am I am an academic that came on the show to talk about the new party, and now you're just.
I know, but you're a very smart guy, and because you're a smart guy, I think smart people should be able to accept that Hamas are terrorists.
I want to talk about just mindlessly screaming terrorist isn't going to have any contribution to your listeners. What is the definition under international law of the additional protocols of the Geneva Convention and the UN Core Convention? Occupied people have a right to defend themselves even by arms.
Who's occupied?
The Palestinian people are legally occupied.
How long was Israel? When did Israel leave Gaza? When did Israel leave Gaza? You and I know this. When did Israel leave Gaza?
In 2005.
Okay, and so who was controlling Gaza between 2005 and the 2023 7th October attacks?
Gaza.
Hamas controlled Gaza.
No, legally,
no,
Israel
Hamas controlled Gaza, backed by Iranian state terrorism.
Okay, all right. Look, we're not going to agree on any of this, so there's no point. You're just screaming cheap.
I'm not screaming. I'm telling you facts, and I'm upset that an academic and a bright man like you just can't simply call Hamas terrorists. But I will allow you the right to reply to the fact that President Macron is the first Western leader to be calling publicly and stating that France will, at the UN General Assembly in September, formally acknowledge the state of Palestine. Keir Starmer is under a lot of pressure, both within his cabinet as well as with the wider public. I accept those, I would say, just more on the left of the British politics, to do similar, although he seems to be very much waiting until he says a ceasefire is agreed. Do you think, do you welcome this move by Monsieur Macron?
Well, look, I think the Palestinian people are consciously and deliberately being exterminated in Gaza, and there's a campaign of extermination in the West Bank. Right now, recognizing it, I mean, I guess Israel, they've shifted the goalpost so much that they're saying, oh my God, how can you do this? This is anti-Semitic. I'm sure you believe it's anti-Semitic to recognize Palestinian state. But to me, it's symbolism. And what we need is action. We need sanctions against Israel. We need full sanctions, economic sanctions, to stop the campaign of starvation and bombing that's happening in Gaza. And otherwise, we're seeing every day, we're seeing dozens of people, this is independent reports of people starving to death, most of them children. I think recognition of Palestine is largely symbolic, and it is actually meaningless as there's an extermination campaign happening against the Palestinian people. What we need is action right now, not symbolism.
Dr. Ashok, thank you so much for joining us. I appreciate that. And we did so well, as you say, until we got onto that topic there, but I'm sure we were always likely to disagree. Ladies and gentlemen, tell us what you think. Do you think it's time to recognise the state of Palestine? Do you believe Monsieur Macron is right and Keir Starmer should now be doing the same? Do you support Jeremy Corbyn's new party? Let us know. 0344 499 1000. Text in the word talk at the start of your message to 87222 on messages on X at talkTV.
Some breaking news this morning revealed that under the Terrorist Act, 242 people were arrested in the year to June of this year.
That's something you can indulge in as to all the people who aren't going to prison because, well, there's no prison spaces.
So this is a talk exclusive we've been looking at.
I said, you take these cuffs off me and speak to me like a human being rather than a common criminal.
You're just left wondering, does these people who lead us actually hate Britain? Yeah. Do they not love our country and everything that we've stood for?
If you want to know what's really wrong with this country, fundamentally the decision was taken beginning in the 1960s to abolish the idea of personal responsibility, to explain all crime as some kind of reaction to bad social conditions or abuse or whatever it might be, and to cease to enforce law as law is to cease to get rid of the old concept of punishment. As it were, the working maxim of the prison system in this country used to be the due punishment.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back, everybody. It's Jonathan Gullis sitting in for the great Alex Phillips, and we're going to go straight to our next guest, who I grovel with apology for keeping on the line for longer than anticipated. That is Kevin Hurley, former Detective Chief Superintendent in the Metropolitan Police. Hello, Kevin. How are you?
Hi, Jonathan. No need to grovel.
No, you're very...
I was enjoying your programme.
No, thank you so much. Thank you. Well, shocking news in The Sun that has got this amazing exclusive that says that they've personally seen, as in a journalist who wrote this story firsthand, asylum seekers in hotels going into large stores in London, such as, and then robbing them blind. Liberty, Ralph Lauren, John Lewis, and using tin-foiled lined bags in order to do this. In fact, a whistleblower, one of the security staffers, said that 70% of shoplifters in the West End are these illegal migrants. Does this shock you?
No, not at all. It's an obvious product of what you would get. I think one of the things, if I may comment about the asylum seekers, so people have got it right. I've worked all over the world since I've retired from the police, Iraq, Afghanistan, Africa. So I've worked in the environments where these young men come from. They've got nothing down for them. They've got no life chances. So if you are a risk taker and a chancer, you will cross the Med and take the chance to come to the land of milk and honey, which is the UK, where they quite rightly believe they're going to get everything free. When you've got that mentality of a chancer, a risk taker, it means nothing to you to go and shoplift in these shops. I mean, it's kind of like walking into heaven and taking what you want. Because if you move around Africa, what you will find is in many shops, everything that's on sale is protected behind grills and bars because people have nothing. So I'm not surprised in the slightest that that is happening. And equally, I'm not surprised because there's absolutely no deterrent to shoplifting these days. And the reason for it is the police don't respond or do anything, mainly because they're completely overwhelmed, completely understaffed. They're extremely inexperienced because everyone is leaving. And as Boris did, he tried to fill up what his party had done when he slashed 40,000 police jobs with newbies who are all finding, oh, I don't like it, and they're leaving. So the police are starting, quite frankly, to crumble badly at the edges. There are very few courts going because they've all been shut by the Tory austerity. The prisons are stuffed to bursting, and frankly, it wasn't the RSPCA who put them there, it was in fact the police. There's no more places. Probation is overwhelmed. There is no deterrent to stop this kind of offending. So in short, that's a long answer to say, I am not surprised in the slightest, and you see it every day in incivilities in our daily life, people jumping on the barrier on the tube, people spitting at ticket collectors, refusing to pay their fare on the buses, antisocial behaviour everywhere, police running away quite often when they're confronted on estates. No, I'm not surprised, but you know, if you make the wrong government decisions and slash the police, the courts, the prisons, the judges, probation and drug rehabilitation like the previous government did, let's not be surprised. But equally, going back to the people who come over on the boats, the illegal immigrants, of course they're going to do this. They are risk takers. They've come here for a better life. It's absolutely untrue to say that they are refugees from a threat to their life. I have personally gone undercover in what was the Calais jungle and moved amongst them until I was threatened with being murdered by some Somalis, I might add, but that's another story. And the only people I saw who were genuine asylum seekers were a few small numbers of Kurdish families with women and children. The rest of them are all young men between about 16 and 30 who are coming as chancers because they know they're coming to the land of milk and honey.
Well, Kevin,
and the final point.
Oh, sorry, this, Kevin. Yes, please do.
Having come and spent so much of my time working in, if we're kind, developing nations, but if we're unkind, third world countries, what they also bring is their third world values or developing nation values, which are one of great misogyny towards women. Let's not forget that in Afghanistan, for example, women have to fully cover themselves up. And the awful, awful custom of bachi-bazi, which is child rape of young male boys, is very prevalent amongst Afghan society. So when you bring that value system here, don't be surprised if they are disproportionately represented now as rapists. Similarly, let's look at Algeria, where women are now required in the Kasbah to wear a burqa with only one eye open. That kind of suppressive anti-women culture is what we're now bringing in with these people. Now, I go back to it, in a way, I respect and admire them. They're frankly brave risk takers who are coming to try and get something that they think they'll get here for free. You can't blame them.
Well, thank you so much. Sorry, Kevin, just because I've got the break coming up. But can I just say, you speak for the British people there, I think. I certainly agree a lot with what you say in terms of medieval attitudes being imported into this country. Overwhelmingly, 74% are, as you say, are men between the age of 18 and 39. That's not including the ones who claim to be children, but we know are men because they've got full beards on them. But Kevin Hurley there, former Detective Chief Superintendent of the Metropolitan Police, thank you so much for joining us today. Just to read out a few texts. Listening to your conversation with Dr. Asok, Jonathan, infuriated me. For me, if Hamas stand down, return hostages and the rapists and murderers in the party hand themselves into the international courts for punishment and sign a treaty to disarm, the Palestine people, not Hamas, should then have the opportunity to talk about state recognition. That is from Sean in Somerset. Well, ladies and gents, we want to hear from you. 0344 499 1000. Texting the word talk to 87222 and follow us on measures on X at talkTV. I managed to rattle that somehow. Thank you to the team behind the glass for being so patient, and we'll see you in the next hour.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back, listeners. It's me, Jonathan Gullis, sitting in for the amazing Alex Phillips here on the home of common sense. That is Talk, and we have had a fiery show so far with lots of great topics to cover. Make sure you tell us what you think on the issues about illegal migrants thieving in the high street stores of London and then taking their stuff back to hotels and seemingly not being prosecuted. What do you think about Monsieur Macron saying that we should recognise the state of Palestine? Do you agree with Dr. Ashok and I, who, let's just say, had quite a fiery exchange? Do you think anything can stop Reform UK, as written about in Spectator? And what do you think about the doctor strike? Are you on the doctor side, or is it time that they learn to put up and shut up and realise that the public finances are what they are? Tell us, 0344 499 1000. You can also WhatsApp us on that message, on that number too. Text in the word Talk at the start of your message to 87222, and follow us and message us on X at talkTV. I'm delighted to be joined in the studio by Reform UK rising star, Westminster City Councillor Layla Cunningham. Hello, Layla, how are you doing?
Hi, how are you?
Well, thank you so much once again for coming on to our airwaves. I think I'll start, obviously, with the big story, which has been, obviously, yourself, alongside Nigel Farage and Sarah Poachin, have launched the Lawless campaign, Lawless Britain, over the summer holidays. So whilst other MPs are putting their feet up, you're holding the government to account over the fact that things have got out of hand. I would just ask, and if you don't mind, I've got a graph, obviously, from the Office of National Statistics that should be coming up on the screen very shortly. And the graph shows that, and this is a question that links to what you were asked yesterday, that actually crime in the 2000s was around for those of you listeners who can't see it, was around 12 million plus. And that over the years, it's now down to around overall 6 million crimes. So crime has halved, essentially, over the last 15 years. So what's Reform UK basing this idea that we live in a lawless society on, when the data is trying to suggest something which is actually this country is getting safer?
Hi, where is that data from? Is that the crime survey?
Yes, the crime survey from the Office of National Statistics.
Yeah, so the crime survey is not an accurate reflection of crime. In fact, more accurate is police recorded data. And that's what we've based our campaign on, police recorded data, because that's actually crimes that are recorded, shows that crime's going up in every aspect, from knife crime, from shoplifting, from sexual assault, from domestic abuse. And in fact, police recorded data says that so much goes unreported. So, for instance, they estimate that about over 500,000 sexual assaults go unreported. Knife crime doesn't go reported because the youth are fear retribution. Shoplifting, really, I mean, I have a shoplifter in my ward, a shopkeeper in my ward, who stopped calling the police because he says they screen his calls because he calls so much. People don't report personal theft. And you saw the data yesterday, crime actually has gone up, sadly, and I'm sad to report it.
No, but I was about to say, actually, I saw the interview with yourself on Times Radio, and I was quite shocked to see what I think the metropolitan elite in London seem to totally misunderstand, which is, you can point to this data, and yes, I can try and say, but look, the crime's gone down. But as you say, I know from my time as a Member of Parliament in Stoke-on-Trent North, people weren't reporting crime because they despaired or the police never got back to them. There were lots of things as well going unchecked. For example, any basically shoplifting under the value of £200. The Conservative government on shamingly, which I was part of, basically said to police, don't bother to go and investigate those things. And as you say, yesterday, the ONS has then come out and said crime in England and Wales is actually up 7% compared to March 2024, 9.4 million incidents included. They're arguing that the largest reason for that is fraud's up by 31%, but they do say that there has been, in domestic abuse, for example, 3.8 million people have experienced that in the past year. 4.2 million have experienced some form of harassment. This is obviously predominantly women and girls. And just shy of 1 million have experienced sexual assault. And I think actually what you're saying is chiming in with what the public mood is. I reckon if we surveyed the public about whether they think Britain's lawless, they might have a very different view to what some people in our Westminster circles suggest. Is that your experience in the past couple of weeks?
Of course. I mean, I am the public. I've experienced crime. You know, I've spoken many times about my son being mugged and me having to do the legwork. But actually, my son threw a party for his friends. He was 14 years old. And I was there supervising. And suddenly, half an hour in, two guys walk in, completely masked up, and hit someone with a baseball bat on their heads. I grew up in London. That would have never happened. So crime is rampant. Everyone knows it. But of course, the Westminster elite want to make themselves feel better. They want to show that Reform are extreme, racist, and what did he call it? Dangerous rhetoric. But actually, I think that radicalises people more, makes them more angry. And it makes me angry. How dare you? How dare you deny what I'm going through and what everyone else is?
Gaslighting the country is not the way to go about things.
No.
The country's been gaslit over illegal migration. They were gaslit mostly over grooming gangs, and Baroness Casey's had to once again shine a light and realise that just how many we're seeing even illegal migrants now in these child rape gangs, with a huge surge in those being part of criminal investigations. Of course, we had the big exclusive with The Sun out today, which shows that the asylum seekers have been literally videoed leaving the Holiday Inn hotel in some part of central London, taking themselves over to stores like Liberty with bags lined with tin foil, just brazenly shoving whatever luxury goods they can in there, barging through ticket barriers and then taking themselves back to the hotels, and seemingly without any repercussions. In fact, the security guards at the shop say, number one, they estimate 70% of the shoplifters in the West End are now illegal migrants, and they obviously say that the problem is, even if we did stop them, they have no ID or documents on them, so we don't even know who they are or then where they go on to, and we can't just walk off from our store. Is this something that your residents in Westminster have been reporting to, and you've seen firsthand through your work as a prosecutor?
I've seen. I was a prosecutor in Westminster, and I can tell you that these shoplifters, anyone who commits sexual assault as an illegal migrant, will get full legal aid paid for by the taxpayer. I've had people come in, receding hairline, white hair, and he's claimed he's a child. He's claimed he's under 16, so we can't treat him as an adult. And
because we don't do testing to prove that, you have to take it at face value?
Well, how do you test? It's very difficult to test. And then you get the publicly defended lawyer who says, you know, we have to pay for an age assessor. It delays the court. Because he's supposedly 16, you can't remand him in custody. And then I've had other public defenders come up and say, you know, my client's just come on a boat. He's illegal. He can't work. How is he supposed to make a living? He has to commit crime. And this is paid for by us. It's contemptuous. And it's making people... We've just had enough, Jonathan. And everyone ignores us. And worse, says we're lying.
Now, out of interest, you obviously represent an area that would be seen to be anything but reform. You very bravely have decided to step in there. What's the reaction been? Look, there's criticism of reforms plans around how's this being funded, the fact that 30,000 additional police officers, these Nightingale prisons, and how the speed in which they can be knocked up and the cost of manning those and the security around those, as well as obviously this deportation. How easy is that to do when other countries may say you have to take some of yours back, and obviously that will then add cost, you know, by putting people back into prison over here, as well as obviously just some saying some countries just may blank out refuse. Is this... I mean, for me, just so you're aware, when I hear the criticism of reform policy, I think sometimes that, yes, the detail does matter, and by the next election, for reform to have any chance of winning, they're going to have to show the sums add up and the detail and the legal prowess is there. But do you think actually at the moment, a bit like what some, like The Spectator, have been saying, reform are just chiming with public mood, and the public are now crying out for any radical solution from the sort of consensus that we've seen for many years now?
Yeah, Jonathan, just in relation to your first question, I'm not in politics to save my seat. And yeah, admittedly, I could probably keep my seat better with the Tories now because they've got more of a ground game in Westminster. I'm here to tell the truth. And the Tories and Labour have decimated, Sadiq Khan and Mayor, decimated our policing. Our criminal justice system really doesn't take crime seriously anymore. You know, someone can come into court and say they have ADHD, and that's a mitigating factor. In terms of our plans to get 30,000 more police, we need visible policing. A police patrolling the streets is a deterrent. I was in Oxford Street yesterday, I did a video, I didn't see one police on the street, and I'm there a lot. I never see police. My kids never see police. When I was growing up, I felt safe because I knew there was a bobby down the road. I was a bit scared of what to do. I don't see that anymore. And in terms of deporting them, if they don't want to be deported, we will deport them abroad to another prison at half the cost. There will be no choice. We will not put the human rights of prisoners above the human rights of British people. That has to end.
Do you take, though, the criticism there will be, a bit like Jeremy Corbyn will be attacked now with his new party alongside Zara Sultana, that Reform UK are offering your cake, you know, galore. You can have everything that you want, and somehow magically it's going to be paid for. But financially, it doesn't stack up, does it?
Oh, it definitely does. The tax gap between crime and tax revenue that could be collected if crime was not committed is 9 billion. The HMRC says crime costs us 80 billion a year, and some studies put it as high as 170 billion. So these plans are meant to pay themselves many, many times over, and it is actually a betrayal from successive governments that they've ignored it.
And when we hear about the net zero money, Richard Tice obviously saying that for a long time that it was about 30 billion a year, and the Office for Budget Responsibility actually backing that up. But are you not now in the danger of basically spending the same money over and over again when it comes to saying that that will initially be used to part fund this until, as you say, crime comes down, and therefore that should then reduce the cost on the state?
No, everything we've said is fully costed, and we gave the press a fully costed plan. In terms of net zero, it's absolutely madness, because the governments say that, the Tories especially and Labour, they talk about net zero, but they don't do it. So, for instance, when I was trying to be an MP in various constituencies, the only way to increase renewable energy on our grid is to build pylons. Yet everyone in all those constituencies are actually campaigning against pylons. We do not have the grid capacity for more renewable energy providers. Yes, we decarbonised and we sang we got praise for being the first country to decarbonise, but Russia and India are increasing their coal production by 40%, and the only people that suffer are squeezed are the middle. Our industries, our manufacturing industries, they're all dead. We're importing stuff from China. Why? We're the best in the world. We have the best universities. We were the land of innovation, but due to EU regulation that the Tories, didn't remove, Kemi Badenoch failed abysmally. She only removed 400 because it was too hard. It's another betrayal of the democratic process.
Well, it won't shock you, Layla, but I'm putting net zero in the bin. As a Stoke-on-Trent resident and former Stoke-on-Trent MP, the ceramics industry is on the verge of total collapse. That's thousands of jobs, as well as those in the supply chain. And the companies are quite clear. The governments of both Conservative and now, particularly under Ed Miliband and Labour, their plan is essentially to offshore carbon in order to be able to say we're carbon neutral. But that comes at the risk of then deindustrialising, leaving communities decimated in terms of job prospects for the future, and making us reliant on overseas territories to supply us these goods. And as we saw in the pandemic, China start playing games where they drip feed bits of PP in to distort the price, and even then gave us some as a charity token, as if we're meant to say, oh, thank you so much, China, from where the disease we know first originated.
But also, I think it was under Liz Truss, they shut down all our energy storage under the naive belief that we could always import cheap energy from Russia. Like, for instance, Germany fared much better because they have 40% storage. France bills are lower because they have 70% nuclear. We have like 4%. They talk the talk, but actually they do the total opposite, and it's us paying the price. And it's madness. It's infuriating.
I know, I can see it. And actually, as you say, with reform, you talk about Kemi Badenoch. Well, Kemi Badenoch was out, we saw, in Bromley the day before, or on the day of polling day yesterday, for an important by-election alongside one of her Conservative parliamentarians for that constituency, Peter Fortune. We've got the photo up here on the screen. She was tweeting on the day as well that she was out there looking for a big Conservative hold. Reform UK gained it. And Wales, in Cardiff, Chris Bryant, the Labour minister, was applauding Labour seeing a vote share decrease of 17%, and somehow clinging on in an area that they have 54 of the 79 councillors, with Reform coming a very strong second. In Lichfield, we saw, again, a by-election which the Conservatives held, but Reform still getting around 20-odd% of the vote. And even in Dorset, Reform were level pegging with the Lib Dems in what should be now a Lib Dem stronghold, allowing the Conservatives, yes, to win, but still putting in a strong showing. Is the momentum's not stopping anytime soon, is it?
No, because we speak the truth. We know what people want. We know the issues. We diagnose it and we have a solution. Whereas Labour and Conservatives are just ignoring it and compounding the failures. He won in Bromley with 34%, new to the game, won with 34%, and that's in London. And you said what happened when I defected. I got so many residents texting me going, well done you, I voted Reform secretly. And you know what Labour did? They put out a leaflet saying Councillor Cunningham has defected. Let's show her that reform-type politics doesn't belong in our community. And I'm the only one that lives there, is raising my children there, and works there and was born there. And they have none of them live there, and they have the audacity to say that, and they look down on us. They look down on the ordinary people, and I think people are sick of it.
Well, that was very powerful indeed. And this Spectator piece that says Canadian Sort of Reform, Tim Shipman, Politico, wrote it. I raised it with James Hill, the deputy political editor, earlier. It's got this fascinating line that says Nigel Farage doesn't actually really want to be Prime Minister, but feels that he's got no choice but to be because of just the state the country's in. In your interactions with Nigel, do you find that he's a restless guy, that he would rather maybe go off and earn a few quid, or do you think that he does feel sort of the weight of expectation now on his shoulders that he's going to have to deliver, and that if he fails to deliver, then the country could be in an even more dangerous state with extremists on the right and the left looking to gain off what Nigel's always held back as the far right?
Nigel's the reason I defected. Nigel has the determination, steel, to save this country. He's the only one. He's been going at it for 30 years. Everyone's trying to shut him down, political assassinations. He's so resilient, and he speaks for the people. And he is the one, he's the reason. And absolutely he wants to be Prime Minister, and he's determined, and he will be Prime Minister, because when you hear him speak, you want to say, hell yeah. I completely agree with you. Well, the others, you don't even want to listen.
The charge that's regularly put against reform is that professionalisation. They're going to have to build an operation campaign-wise that can handle a nationwide general election and all the scrutiny that comes with it during that very fast-paced campaign, as well as a policy unit that's going to be able to work in-house and develop those credible policies for a manifesto. Are you seeing, slowly but surely, that journey to further professionalisation? Are you confident that reform will get there come the next general election, to have everything in place, which, as I say, I find it quite funny when Conservative and Labour go at this, because I think, well, Labour's had 100 years to get to where they are. The Conservatives nearly 200 years. You're being asked to do this in a matter of 4 or 5 years. But are you seeing that professionalisation, or are you concerned that there's still quite a long way to go? There's criticisms around regarding Zia Yusuf, for example, internally, that we get briefed out anonymously, as well as obviously sometimes, we've had 3 by-elections after Reform gained seats in May, where they've actually not been able to hold on to those seats. Again, another charge about where Reform win, they then can't hold. Is that something you're concerned about, or is that just politics?
Zero concern. I get contacted every day by incredibly successful people who are like, I want to help. I'm going to give you my time for free. I'm a professional in this. I'm a professional in that. Let me help you. But we already have some of the brightest, most patriotic, dedicated people I've met in Reform. And I'd met some of them before I defected. And that's what really encouraged me, is that they're really fighting for Britain. They're not fighting to maintain power, to have a certain number of seats. They are fighting for our country. And that's the only party that's doing it right now. And in terms of people, as I said, fantastic people. I've had mums reach out to me on social media, even mums that I know. I was shared on a WhatsApp group in Somerset saying, I really wanted to switch to Reform. I was scared of the pushback. I was scared of being insulted. But now that I've seen you, it seems okay. People realise that we're not racist. We're not far right. We're British. And we represent the British people. That's it.
And finally, obviously, we've seen that the scenes in Epping, where we know that actually very brave mums decided to make a stand after a girl was sexually assaulted. Obviously, the accused is denied all charges, and we won't comment on that individual personally. And they'll obviously go through a court case to find their innocence or guilt. But mums and the community have rightly come out onto the streets and said this hotel, the Bell Hotel in Epping, needs to shut. We know that Councillor Jane McIver, who is a member of Reform UK, has been reporting from the ground about the scenes, and yet we see many questions talking about stirring up racial division, the far-right protests that are taking place, which is all very shocking indeed. Do you find this, how are you feeling about what's going on in Epping? Do you understand the anger of the local people?
Of course I understand the anger. I'm the mother of daughters. If I knew that a hotel housing illegal migrants, one of whom has been charged with multiple sexual assaults, is living there, and I don't know if he's been remanded in custody or not, because what you don't realise is that when he goes to court, his defence lawyer will say he doesn't have a criminal record. We all abide by our past, but because they come with no records, and the court takes that into account, I'd be devastated. This is my home. People have spent their money for their house. They've built a community there, and then they house these illegal migrants or legal migrants, or men. And I heard yesterday residents saying it's changed the fabric. You've got men hanging out on benches, and it's intimidating, and it's contemptuous. It really slaps in the face. Pensioners are struggling to pay their pensions because we've cut the winter fuel allowance, or they U-turn now. People are asking, can I feed my children? Can I send them to school? Yet we're housing migrants in 3- or 4-star hotels paid for by the British taxpayer. And then if we complain, we're called far right, or we're called racist. I called it out online, and I was called, oh, you're racist. There's nothing far right about being angry about this. It is just normal.
Well, and for your sake, listeners, we have got a local mother, Sarah White, coming on the show later on. We look forward to hearing from her about why she's taking a stand. Layla Cunningham, Westminster City Councillor for Reform UK, thank you so much for joining us today. Listeners, let us know what you think of what Layla's been saying. Is she speaking for you? Is she speaking for Britain? Do you hope to see her in a parliamentary constituency near you sometime soon and get her elected into Parliament? Are you backing Reform UK, or do you still have questions? Call in 0344 499 1000. You can also WhatsApp us on that number too. Message with the word talk at the start of your message to 87222 and follow and message us on X at talkTV. We'll see you shortly.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello everybody, Jonathan Gullis sitting in for the great Alex Phillips here on the home of common sense. That is Talk. And blimey, what a show we've had. Dr. Ashok coming on earlier on to talk about Jeremy Corbyn's new party, as well as refusing to say that he agrees with the legal definition that's been prescribed to Hamas as a terrorist organisation. And then Layla Cunningham, Westminster City Council for Reform UK, giving us some really big explosiveness there about how illegal migrants are getting a total legal aid. If they claim their age, that is a delay tactic. And of course, because they have no documents, we have therefore no criminal record of their history, and have to take that as face value that this could be the first ever crime that they've committed. And you have been calling in with your views. We're going to go to Miranda in Cumbria, who is very worried about what Dr. Ashok is teaching at university and suggesting that no wonder the students are hard left. Hello, Miranda, not Ashok. How are you?
Hello, I'm very well, thank you. I was just listening to, because he's an associate professor, isn't he?
Yes, he is.
My concern is that it's related to his tone. So he tries to appear quite rational, and it's almost like he is quite manipulative in the way he speaks. And I just wondered who is he teaching? And it does really make you consider why these students become so far left in their view, and the fact that he wouldn't really condemn Hamas. My other concern is that how can students actually maybe contradict what he's saying? How does he respond if any student in his class actually does try and argue a point with him? It is a worry. That's all I wanted to say, really.
No, look, thank you so much, Miranda from Cumbria there. I think raising very legitimate questions. The one thing I would have certainly said during my time as a Member of Parliament is that the standards in which teachers are governed and monitored by don't necessarily always apply to university lecturers, and it's very much a case-by-case basis. I called out some lecturers at Warwick University during my time as a Member of Parliament regarding, I thought, their inappropriate conduct and the things that they were saying, which I think were personally anti-Semitic. They would obviously refute that, and of course have never had any disciplinary action brought against them, but I obviously spoke on behalf of students who had raised concerns from their teaching. We've also got a caller, Dave, who's down in South Wales, and he wants to tell us what he thinks about the doctor strikes.
Well, yes, it's an ongoing thing because governments will never maintain the value of your wages. They don't go with the cost of living. They, whether we can afford it or not, they will always try to cut it back and give it a lesser, so that even if they make the doctors equivalent to what they think they should have today, next year they'll start cutting back on them again. It's a policy with politicians that they cut they don't maintain the value of your earnings. It's the same with everybody in the country.
So are you supportive, Dave, of the strikes? Oh, sorry, Robert. Are you support?
No, I'm not.
Dave, sorry. You're not supportive of the strikes?
I mean, there's two sides to it. There's the moral issue of doctors with the Hippocratic Oath and earning the money. Yeah, they've got this conflict. They've come down in favour of the money. I would have come down in favour of the Hippocratic Oath and been taken for a mug by the government. But the thing is that we have to get control of our finances across the nation. We cannot just do it on a whim and a pat. The thing is, wing and a prayer. The thing is, we all have money. We all want its value maintained, but what is the government doing? They're cutting back on the value. My pound today will probably be worth 90p next year. And there will be no increase in my income to cover that. And it is, if it was ever thus, every politician uses the smaller wages settlements as their grip on power. They think that by cutting back the value of the money, they're pleasing the majority of people who would then say that they'll vote for them. If they don't vote, don't maintain with the money, then they lose their seats. And it is the wage settlements are done with a view on keeping the government in power.
Thank you. Sorry, Dave, there. I've got to quickly get on to one last caller here, which is Robert in Hertfordshire. Great call, though, sorry, by the way, Dave, who also wants to talk about the doctor's strike. Robert, how are you?
I'm fine. I'm your first call. I've never called you before, so...
Thank you so much. It's really great to hear. I really appreciate it.
It's my first time. It's been a long time since I've said that.
Yeah. Well, look, we'll look after you, OK? We'll keep it nice and safe.
What it is, it's in reference to your conversation on the NHS. Now, I'm 73, and in January, I was diagnosed with heart failure.
I'm very sorry to hear that.
I'm not going to name any hospitals. So what I did was they made me an appointment in January for September coming.
Yeah.
And it was a telephone conversation, 8 months. Now, someone brought it, I thought this might be interesting to your listeners and viewers. Someone brought to my attention a thing called the Patient's Charter. Are you conversed with it? Do you know what that is?
Not well enough, unfortunately, Robert. No, I've heard of it, but I can't recall it from memory.
Well, you should hear of it, and so should all your listeners. It's our right as a UK citizen to claim the Patient's Charter. Now, doctors don't like you mentioning it. My doctor wasn't too happy when I mentioned it, but a friend. And what it means is it's your right to go to any hospital of your choice for your first initial consultation. It's your right. You can go to Timbuktu. Now, they can't deny that. Now, it might be once you've had that consultation that they might transfer you to another hospital for the rest of your treatment. But as a UK citizen, and when I called it in, they all went quiet at the other end. Now, as a consequence of me calling it in a few weeks ago, I've already had my appointment with the hospital of my choice. Now, if I would have still been waiting for the NHS, I would have still had another two months to wait. So I just thought it might be interesting.
That's very interesting.
You know, and all I can say to your listeners, use it. It's your right. It's called the NHS Charter, and your doctor's not going to be too pleased. But you're going to have to go to your doctor, and it's like an untold secret. It's like unbelievable, you know, they don't know. All you say is, I've done it in a letter, in an email, so they can't, you know, I don't like writing, I don't like having telephone conversations because they get unrecorded. Put it in an email and say, as your patient, I am claiming my right to the patient's charter.
Well, thank you so much, Robert, for that insightful call, and I hope you obviously get well with your condition. One quick text we've had. This is from Joe in Vietnam. So we are truly all over the world today. Whilst I admire everything Reform is saying, the black and white of it is the best way, with the way things are going in 4 years' time, the country will be in such a bad state. There will be no way back from it at all. No matter who is running the show. Sad but true. Plus, there's always a chance Labour will change things, so there will be no fair general election. Anyway, great show. Well, thank you, Joe, for tuning in from Vietnam. Make sure that you get everyone else in Vietnam listeners, as well, by calling in and texting in 0344 499 1000. Text in the word talk at the start of your message to 87222 and follow us and message us on X at talkTV. We will be speaking next with Gareth Wyn-Jones, a cow and sheep farmer, to talk about the breaking news about a record number of British family farms shutting in the wake of Rachel Reeves' inheritance tax raid.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning, you great people of Great Britain. It's Jonathan Gullis sitting in for the fantastic Alex Phillips today. I have the pleasure of having our next great guest. His name is Gareth Wyn-Jones. He is a cow and sheep farmer. He is having to suffer the consequences of some of these dreadful decisions under this Labour government that have been acted so far. Hello, Gareth, how are you?
Yeah, Borada, how are you?
I'm all right, thank you. If you don't mind, Gareth, I'll quickly just set the scene for our listeners, which is that a total of 6,365 agriculture, forestry and fishing businesses have closed over the past year, according to data published by the Office for National Statistics, the highest since quarterly data was first published in 2017. The majority of these closures took place during the first 6 months of the year after Miss Reeves, the Chancellor, announced in October that she would cut the amount of inheritance tax relief available to family farms. Just so we give some balance, Lee Anderson, Member of Parliament for Reform UK, is quoted as saying pushing the rising tax and red tape were, quote, pushing British farming to the brink. No government in modern history has done more to damage rural Britain than Labour is right now. And we also have a quote from the Shadow Secretary of State for the Department of Energy, Environment, Food and Rural Affairs, that is Victoria Atkins, that we can put up on our screen shortly, where she has also condemned the decision by this Labour government to introduce this family farm tax and committed to the Conservative Party scrapping it if it were to seek power at the next election. Gareth, does this news shock you that we've heard today?
Not really. We knew it was coming. That's why we've been out protesting, trying to get the government to change their mind about the crazy inheritance tax. Now, you know, they said it was going to affect a very, very small minority of these farms. Well, I've got a few figures from Wales from here. FUW have said it's going to affect 90% of family farms in Wales. We've got the NFU saying 74%. And I've got a friend that's an accountant that's done a few figures. He reckons it'll be closer to 94%. So, you know what I mean? It's heartbreaking. These are the people that are feeding the nation.
Yep.
These are the people that are trying to produce affordable food to go forward. And food security should be at the top, especially when we're in such a volatile time where we could go into war or we could have, you know, a climate disaster in another country. We need to protect the people that are feeding us. I'll tell you something else as well that's very, very frustrating. Some of these farms now that are being sold, just up the road from me here, there's a farm just being sold. Maes Caradog, a beautiful hill farm, the last privately owned hill farm in that area. And a couple of local farmers tried to buy it, but the Old National Trust went in there and scooped it up. You know, gave them a bigger bid than anybody else can afford. And this is the sad reality. We've got multinational corporations coming into the countryside to buy land so they can offset their carbon, so they can rewild it. Where's this food going to come from? Wake up and smell the coffee before you go hungry. I've been saying for 4 years, we are sleepwalking into food shortages and nobody's listening. And since this Labour government has come in, it's gone even worse. And we've been under a Labour government in Wales for 26 years. We are desperate for change. We are desperate for people to listen to our problems so we can drive forward to make sure that food security and food is affordable to the poorer people in society. And that is our job. That's our job. Yes, look at this beautiful environment I've got behind me. We protect that as well. We protect that. That's what we do. My family's been on this land for 375 years. And it's heartbreaking. My father had his 89th birthday on Tuesday. You know, he'll be lucky if he lives 7 years. Or he said to me, maybe I'll be lucky, I'll die before April, before it comes in. You know, this isn't right to put pressure on family farms like this.
That is deeply...
Right. We want to get on with our job.
No, totally, Gareth. And first of all, thank you for sharing the actual story of a literal farm, as you say, next door. And to hear that, you know, the National Trust have come and swooped it up, which means that lands that could be used to feed the nation may no longer be used in that way. It's heartbreaking to hear that you're sitting around a kitchen table at night with your father, who's now kind of, well, in a British dark humour way, joking about the fact that when's it best for him to die in order to make sure that your family farm of nearly 400 years can continue into future generations. I just can't understand or begin to imagine the devastation that's being felt. I mean, you say that you're desperate for change and people to listen. Do you feel that anyone is listening? Is there anyone that you feel is on your side? Do you feel that there's been any improvement in terms of the government even vaguely looking at you turning on this ahead of the next election?
I've just come home from the Welsh, the Royal Welsh Show down in Bilfwell. So I got home yesterday. Fantastic show, great people, fantastic animals. You know, we're there as an industry trying to show our love of our job. You know, how good we are at producing stuff, the producers and then the food. But I was fortunate. I got to meet Kemi Badenoch on Monday, had a good chat with her, and she said the first thing she will do is reverse the inheritance tax. And I said, I hope you do, or I'll hold your feet to the fire. And she said, no, that'll be the first thing I do. I got to meet Nigel Farage as well. He was very, very positive about, you know, protecting our future on the land here in Wales. I've met with the Plaid Cymru members as well. They were great. I had a chat with Hywel Anchor. That was a small chat. It wasn't long enough really, but you know, we've got to put pressure on every single political party to protect the agricultural sector, you know, and the environment. Don't get me wrong, but people need to be fed, and if they're not fed, and if we don't protect the people that are on the land, that know this land for hundreds of years, we'll have nothing. The Trust are taking away the animals from these farms up in Nanfrancon. They're rewilding it. They're planting trees. They're taking away families. You know, first language, Welsh-speaking families are going to be taken away from that. That's our heart. That's our rural communities, and we need to protect it for the next generation. So we have to work together to find solutions. But taking the animals and taking the people away from the land is not the solution.
Gareth, you said Cohen Badenoch gave you a very explicit commitment that she would reverse. Can I just quickly ask, you said you had a positive conversation with Nigel Farage as well. Is Reform UK's position to also reverse the inheritance tax on farms, or is that not yet clear to you?
We had more of a chat about the situation in Wales. You know, I asked them what were they going to do. You know, they're a new party and they want to be understanding what our problems are. So, you know, what we need is for politicians to sit down and listen to us, not close the door, open the door. We've been knocking on the door with Labour for 26 years and they haven't opened it. They haven't listened to farmers. They have a round table where they sit around to, you know, make these policies that are going to be for us in Wales for 5 years. And we've got an election in May this next year. So, you know, there's a lot of questions we need to be asking every single political party to find out which party is going to be the best for Wales, because we know what's happening in the UK at the moment, and it's an absolute shambles across the board. We cannot keep going and keep putting pressure on an industry that's already on its knees and struggling. We get a 1% return for our working capital. That's our farms. And, you know, they're going to take 20% of that away with this inheritance tax. What's going to happen? Either we're going to have to sell 20% of that land, or we'll have to have an increase in food of 20% just to level it off. You know, what young farmer wants to come into that situation when they're going to be borrowing more money, going into more debt, with a volatile situation, the weather, supermarkets pushing prices down, and the government putting so much pressure? No wonder we've got mental health crisis and people taking their own lives. We have to change the situation in the United Kingdom and build a better Britain on our bellies. If we have people eating good food, it will save millions, billions to the NHS. Teach it in school, get farming, food production, cookery back in the curriculum. Local, seasonal, healthy, nutritious food. That's what we do as farmers.
I'll tell you what, Gareth, we're going to have a lot of people texting and saying, God, they hope you run for Parliament one day, because you're the type of people that we need in there with actual lived experience of this. And can I just say, Gareth, and I would be keen to get your view on this. Look, I entered British politics as a parliamentarian, very much a free trade libertarian, OK? The idea of a laissez-faire attitude, we should do deals with the world that will help drive down prices. I then represent a community like I do in Stoke-on-Trent. I see that globalisation has meant that whilst we are hammering ourselves with high energy costs and chasing net zero, or that, but at the same time, obviously making it difficult to employ people with things like the national insurance increase, we're doing deals with other countries where essentially they subsidise their energy sector. It means manufacturers are moving abroad, and obviously they're using, in many cases, slave labour, if not very cheap labour too, which means that they can make a larger profit margin. The danger for the farming sector with these trade deals, isn't it, is that the reality the British people need to understand they have to make a trade-off. If we want to import lots of overseas beef and lamb, as well as fruit and veg that maybe we can still grow in this country, that will come at a cost to the British farming community. And it now needs to come to a clear choice. Do we want to have sustainable farming in Britain, where we don't rely on the rest of the world to always supply us everything that we can get, and actually grow and to nurture what we can in this country? And that might come at a slightly higher price on the shelves. That doesn't necessarily have to, as you say. I'm sure you'll have an answer on that. But actually, that's a trade-off. It's about having the ability for Britain to continue farming whilst also making sure we can have food on our shelves and not make us overly reliant on the rest of the world, who, let's be quite frank, could play games at any moment with our food supply, making us a food vulnerable nation.
Yeah, exactly. And, you know, we have innovation today that we can grow a lot of different things in this country. You know, that's what I'm saying, build a better Britain on our bellies. Innovation where we can use, you know, slurry tanks to capture that methane, then to go on to greenhouses to produce tomatoes for a longer season. You know, there's ways we can start to produce more food. But if we haven't got the investment and the capital to put forward, government should be incentivizing farmers to put that investment. They should be putting grants aside so farmers then can spend more money so we can produce more food in this country. Yeah, listen, I'm for free trade deals, but don't forget every other country will be using different chemicals that we're not allowed to. They will be injecting different hormones and all kinds of antibiotics into the chicken, you know, chlorinated chicken from America, into the beef. All we are is what we eat. Our health is our wealth. So if you're eating healthy, you're going to feel better mentally, physically, emotionally. So get good food into these people and get good food that's produced by the British farmer. And that's where government have gone wrong. You know, they have really turned their back. And the previous government went much better. Yep. These have been an absolute disaster, especially when Keir Starmer had promised in the NFU conference that he would protect family farms. And he has absolutely betrayed every single one of us in the United Kingdom, which is heartbreaking.
Thank you, Gareth Wynne-Jones there, cow and sheep farmer in Wales. Thank you so much for that very powerful conversation we just had there. Gareth, for Prime Minister, or at least Secretary of State for Environment, Food and Rural Affairs, as far as I'm concerned, we need more great British patriots like him in our politics to make the real change. And this Labour government should hang its head on shame on the misery it's causing to the British farming community. Tell us what you think of that conversation. Should Labour never be forgiven nor forgotten for what they've done to British farming? 0344 499 1000. Text the word talk at the start of your message to 87222 and follow us on messages on X at talkTV. We'll see you shortly.
There is absolutely no excuse on this earth for why we are where we are 1 year into more than a year into a new government. This administration had plenty of time to prepare proper solutions to stop the boats. What's happened, in fact, as everybody knows, is that there's been a multiplier. Instead of stopping the boats, even more than ever are coming over. And for the government now to say, oh gosh, you know, things are looking a little bit hairy.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back, everybody. Jonathan Gullis sitting in for Alex Phillips here on the home of Common Sense. That is Talk. Let's get to our next guest. Her name is Sarah White. She's a local resident in Epping. She's also been one of the mums on the protest. Hello, Sarah. How are you?
Good morning, Jonathan. I'm good, thank you. How are you?
I'm good, and thank you so much for, one, coming on, and two, thank you so much for your bravery in continuing to make a stand for women and girls in particularly across your community. May I just ask, what was it, when did you first hear about the news of what had happened, and when did you join, first of all, one of the protests outside the Bell Migrant Hotel?
Well, I was at one of the very first protests, and it was when the news had broken about what had happened to this young girl, the whole community come together. And I just feel that as a mother, you have to support everybody in the community.
How do you feel about some of the way it's been reported? There's a lot of conversation about certain elements of the far right, and look, I'm sure there is the odd one or two that are trying to use your campaigning and your hard work to try and spew their nastiness and divisiveness that you, I know, would have no qualm with, you know, in qualms quashing whatsoever and telling them to get away. But the way it's just characterised as the far right, is it insulting to women and mothers like yourselves that when you're raising very serious legitimate safety concerns about women and girls in your community who, as you say, are victims of these young men being put up in this hotel and seemingly being allowed to roam the streets, drink, and in some newspapers being said that even, you know, we've seen 6,000 odd legal migrants gambling with the money that you, the taxpayer, are having to pay for it?
Yeah, to be fair, it's incredibly insulting because this has got nothing to do with left or right. This is to do with young girls and women being sexually assaulted, and everybody has the right in this country to feel safe and protected. And these men are coming in undocumented. We don't know who they are, and they've got no place in our community. So I don't know why it comes down to left and right.
Are you satisfied with the way in which this is being policed by Essex Police? Do you feel that they've done a decent job under difficult circumstances, or do you think errors have been made? Obviously, there was a lot of focus around the fact that the sort of counter-protesters, the stand-up to racism, Antifa lot, who amazingly all turn up from God knows where in the country, balaclavaed up, video footage emerging them being escorted, at least walked in, and then some even driven out after the protest. Do you think that's been a bad policing decision, or do you think the police are just trying to do what they can in difficult circumstances?
I think the police themselves are probably not to blame. However, the Commissioner has got a lot to answer for because they are following orders from their superior, and they are being told to go and collect the counter-protesters from Epping Station. Why on earth you would bring someone to counter-protest against young girls being sexually assaulted is beyond me, and that in itself incited violence.
And you say, obviously, the Commissioner and Chief Constable. Do you think that, obviously, Nigel Farage, an Essex Member of Parliament, has called for the Chief Constable to resign over his handling? Do you share that sentiment? Do you think that the Chief Constable should step aside? He's failed in his duty?
100%. 100%. And why on earth there was police officers from five different forces: the Met, British Transport Police, Essex, Norfolk, and I believe Suffolk last night. There is too many police at a peaceful protest.
Are you feeling almost like you're sort of eventually being intimidated, essentially, to stop protesting? It's better off that we people like yourselves should just go home and not worry about it. Is that the sentiment that's being felt on the ground, in the sense of, you know, people who just want to simply demonstrate, as you say, rightly to say, we do not know who these people are, we do not know their background, we do not know their intentions. They're being put up in this hotel at the cost of us, the British taxpayer. We know that at least one individual, as you say, has been so far charged with 3 serious sexual assaults. He obviously denies those charges, just as I had to give the balance, just so you know, Sarah, for Ofcom reasons. But obviously, are you feeling almost that, you know, you shouldn't be allowed to protest? Is there a feeling that in the community that, you know, the police would rather you lot were the ones who went away and kept Sturm?
Oh, definitely, 100%. It's almost like as if they're trying to do anything in their anything possible to stop us from protesting, and I just don't understand why they're doing that. There's something bigger going on. If you'd gone to Epping and see that we was being put into cages basically last night,
yes.
And we was asked, are you left or are you right? You know, this has got nothing to do with it. So why would they do that? Surely this is something that the whole community want to be together in this.
As you say, dragging politics into this just seems so murky and dirty, and like you say, when it's actually people like yourselves just protesting purely about the safety of local women and girls in the community. Obviously the council, however, did have a unanimous vote that's made up of all political parties demanding, obviously it is sort of, you know, more for show than actual action, but they have said that they want to see the hotel closed. The Police and Crime Commissioner for Essex, Roger Hurst, has said that he's written to the Home Secretary demanding that she close the Bell Hotel too. Does that give you some comfort that politicians are listening, or is it more just classic, they're jumping on the bandwagon and reacting because they've basically been caught staying silent or avoiding these difficult issues, when it's been people like yourself bravely sticking your necks out to stand up for women and girls?
Oh, definitely. I mean, you know, where are these people? Why aren't they out supporting us? Why aren't they doing more? You know, I believe they can do a lot more. A lot more is in their power. They don't really want to. They will jump on the back of something purely because then they've got to be seen to be doing something. And then the moment we do stop protesting, they think we will stop protesting, they'll jump onto something else and this will be forgotten about. And unfortunately for them, we're not going away now. This is going to be carrying on until it's stopped.
Well, Sarah, thank you for your bravery. Thank you for your patriotism. Thank you for standing up for the safety of women and girls. That's Sarah White, local resident in Epping and mother who's been on the protest. We have a caller on the line who's keen to obviously follow up with this. Hello there. How are you?
Good. How are you doing?
I'm good, thank you, Nigel. Sorry, Nigel in Brighton, I should have said. Apologies, Nigel. Just love to get your views, if you may, on what's been going on in Epping.
Well, from where I see it, I think it's very obvious what's been going on. You know, the media, I'm talking about the mainstream media, the BBC, the Skies and this, the government directed the police to bring in those counter-protesters to create and incite a violent situation. So the media could then come back in and report it as the far-right thuggery. And then by doing that, smoke screen and gaslight the population as to what really is going on. I mean, if you look on the mainstream media news apps, the way they're reporting this is completely different to certainly the way you're reporting it and the way the facts are. So I think that decision to bus in those counter-protesters came right from the top.
Well, that's Nigel from Brighton. Thank you so much for that call. Of course, to give balance, the government would deny that they gave any instruction for either the police to in order to bring those counter-protests in. And the Chief Constable of Essex Police said it was also not a decision made by senior management. It was a decision of officers on the ground, although that shamelessly does throw people under the bus. We have some texts that have been coming in. We've got one here from another person called Jonathan. Great name. I don't know why I say that, but Jonathan from Guildford, who said, reform needs to publicise plans for its El Salvador-style super prisons to detain all illegal migrants and criminals without ID. Those plans alone should start the deterrent process in advance of a reform win at the polls in 2029. We've got another one here from Sue in Devon. We get proper security guards that patrol. We get proper security guards that patrol around the shops in plain clothes. It happens in my day when they are used to work in the big stores in London. They'd be patrolling the stores, and we need to have fit security guards, not someone that can't run. I can't tackle a person. We need to have them fit to be able to do the job properly. That's Sue in Devon regarding, obviously, the Sun exclusive about illegal migrants racking and ruining local communities there as well. And we'll go to Anne in Sussex, who wants to quickly tell us on the line what she thinks about farming and the state of it. Hello, Anne.
Oh, hello, Jonathan. Thank you for having me on. Yes, this is really serious, what is going on. From the moment that this government came in and wanted to attack farmers, amongst others, but particularly the farmers, because I'd been listening to what's going on elsewhere. And if you take away our farmers providing fresh food for us and we just import, that will suit the huge organisations that produce the GMOs, the genetically modified food, and that means that we will have no freedom. That means we have to consume what they provide, and that isn't always for the best. And we've had that with Nestle, with baby food in other countries. This is really serious, and
Indeed.
It means that this will kill our farming, and that certainly this government, and I don't know about other governments, are determined. This is why America won't join the WFO and the World Economic.
Sorry, Anne, I've got to quickly go because we've got a break coming up, but that was a great call and shows that you're on the side of British farming. Listeners, 0344 499 1000, text the word talk to 87222 or message us on X at talkTV.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back, everyone, and now it's good afternoon from me, Jonathan Gullis, sitting in for the great Alex Phillips here on the home of Common Sense. That is Talk. Listeners, we want your texts, we want your calls. We've been flooded already. Do you support the doctor strike? Yes or no? Do they deserve a 29% pay rise? Does anything to make you think that Reform UK can be stopped? Layla Cunningham in the studio earlier, Reform UK Westminster City Councillor. Do you think that the mums have every right to protest outside the Migrant Hotel in Epping, or do you think that it's now become a far-right hate march, essentially, for people down there? Yes or no? And then, of course, in the next hour, we're going to be talking about Donald Trump. He will be making his long-awaited return to the UK to promote, apparently, his golf courses in the UK. Are you excited to see President Donald Trump on the shores? We'll go next to our to Basha Mukherjee. Sorry if I've said that incorrectly. Basha, resident doctor, who is, I believe, in favour of the strikes, and she joins us on the line now. Hello, Basha. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you so much for joining us, first of all. Basha, may I ask, did you vote for the strike action that's taken place today?
I did vote in favour of the strikes,
You
yes.
did vote in favour of the strikes. How long have you been in your training, may I ask? Are you sort of, obviously, I appreciate that you start as a foundation year one all the way through, eventually to registrar. How far are you along that journey at this moment in time?
So I'm about 2 weeks away from qualifying as a GP, essentially. So I'm at the very end of my training, and that I qualified out of university in 2019. So that's been 5 years now.
And may I ask as well, whereabouts on the pay scale are you then at this moment in time? It says here on my notes, I'm happy to be corrected, that when you start year one, essentially, it'll be around the 38,831 mark, and then in the final year could go up to £73,992 per year. Whereabouts are you on that salary scale at this moment in time?
I will say, after taxes, which we are in the higher tax bracket payers, I'm probably left, and you can research this, probably about halfway point in that number that you're suggesting there, of the higher, the absolute higher end. So I'm probably about halfway point. And this can be, you can Google this to find this out about all GP trainees in North London. And we're talking about after taxes and all the other additional expenses that come in as being part of a doctor.
So you just tip into that 40p tax bracket. So for listeners, that's around over the 50,200 mark, where you go into becoming a higher rate taxpayer. Is that accurate?
That's correct, yes.
OK, and so, look, the public would say that over the last 3 years, you've had a 28.9% pay rise already. It's unquestionable that a 29% pay increase on top of that is simply unaffordable. Is it that we need some reality here, and that there's got to be a meeting of minds? The government just simply doesn't have the cash, and it's not government cash, it's taxpayers' cash.
I absolutely agree, and I think sometimes it's quite difficult for the public to understand what the numbers exactly mean. But the resident doctors, and I being one, are asking for pay restoration to the levels of 2008. And we picked that number because we've had a pay erosion from that point onwards. And all we're trying to say is that treat us the same as we were being treated 15, 20 years ago. That's all the ask. This has always been the conversation. Yes, the resident doctors stopped striking in November, and that was based on West Streeting's own promise that he was going to help us get to a journey of full pay restoration. That was the exact deal struck. And at the moment, the pay rise, so to speak, that he's offered us is 0.9% over inflation, which will take us 20 years to get to full pay restoration. From our perspective, that is the government backtracking on their own words, essentially. And I want to remind people that it was Labour that actually brought into effect workers' right to strike. And it was West Streeting. And I've actually physically had a conversation with him. I've interviewed him. And he told us last year, before he was in government, that he was going to do anything in his power to bring the strikes to an end. And in these last 2 weeks that we've been speaking to him, well, the BMA has been speaking to him, he's refused to bring pay into conversation at all. Yes, he's been talking about other things, but essentially pay is going to be the simplest and quickest route to resolution of this debate, essentially.
Do you feel lied to by this Labour government?
It's really difficult because we were let down so badly by the previous government, and it was them that put us in the jeopardy that led to the strikes. I personally still have faith in Wes Streeting. I have physically met him. He genuinely does care about the NHS. I have faith in him that he probably can turn this around. He has at least addressed and actually tried to speak to members of the BMA a little bit more collaboratively, unlike the previous government. However, I think patience is wearing thin on the part of resident doctors. I don't agree with the fact that there is not enough money, because they are forking out money from the NHS budget towards essentially covering the shifts for these strikes. And we want to say that full pay restoration would be 0.5% of the full NHS budget. There is money there. And in Wes Streeting's own words, he is pushing for reform of the NHS. He's trying to push for, change and an overhaul of the whole entire system to stop wastage of the money. So I think the money can be found. And we have to understand that the staff make the NHS what it is. There is nothing else to it.
But do you accept the charge that since Labour came into power, it's about 30 billion, I think, that they've injected into the NHS of additional funding? 2 of every £3 that's spent of that additional funding, so around 20 billion, has simply just gone to cover pay rises. It's not gone to frontline services to, for example, improve access to talking therapies or to boost A&E access, or indeed in the care in the community. Isn't it just wrong then that, like you say, it may only be 0.5%, but out of the additional funding that's been given, shouldn't that be going on having more NHS buildings where necessary, having more infrastructure, more up-to-date equipment and technology to allow you to do your jobs more efficiently, to get the backlog down and make sure that the confidence is restored in the NHS, rather than just paying what the public will feel is an extortionate pay rise well above what the average person's getting in the private sector who is funding the NHS?
I completely agree that funding needs to be found for those areas, and we definitely need to have a full overhaul of all the systems. And this is a cumulative effect of years of underfunding. And I know from the taxpayer's point of view, and I'm a taxpayer myself, it may seem like, where does the money go? I'm absolutely appalled at the services that we as the NHS actually even deliver. And when it comes to actually accessing that service, there's nothing there for people like us who hardly actually access the healthcare services. You can't even get, hold of your GP. But we have to understand what the base problem there is. And that is, when you're working in a system that is so broken, people will find a way to either cut corners themselves because they're unhappy at work. They're going to try to skip days, but based on maybe they're feeling so burnt out, they're going to go on sick leave, and we've been seeing the sick leaves that have been going up in the NHS, or they're going to completely leave the NHS, go to the private sector, or go abroad, which is exactly what's happening. And this is not just in resident doctors' case; it's for all across the board, essentially. And at the moment, the staff is the only thing that we can turn over the quickest. I mean, I'm sure if I've had patients who've come to me and said they couldn't even, they couldn't even understand the person speaking at the other end of the telephone because of their accent, or, they've been rushed to their appointment and, almost treated like sheep to get through the list, essentially. And this isn't fair for the taxpayer who's paying so much money into it. We need doctors that are trained in the UK to stay in the UK and stay and treat our patients here, rather than, accessing healthcare services from across the world, who most people will agree they don't understand the nuance of this culture, and they probably won't be able the best fit necessarily compared to someone who's been trained here. And that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to retain the staff here.
Out of interest, Basha, you obviously said that you retain confidence in Wes Streeting, the Secretary of State for Health and Social Care. The Telegraph has obtained a transcript of a call between Wes Streeting and NHS leaders where, and I quote, he is said to have said, "It is really important that these strikes are not pain-free for resident doctors or the BMA." Doesn't that kind of go against what you've been feeling and sensing from him, that he is someone who's willing to negotiate in good faith and you have confidence? Isn't that sounding... It's quite aggressive, isn't it, really?
I agree. That does sound quite aggressive. And I worry that this could be the start of a failure or a breakdown of the relationship. I wonder if this is down to the fact that he's felt the offer that he's brought to the BMA, the conversation hasn't gone to plan for him. And obviously when he came in, and having met him personally, I think he was very adamant that he really didn't want this ever to be part of the Labour government picture, essentially. So I can understand his anger. Obviously, this undermines his own negotiating power and his own power in general as the health secretary. I can see why he's feeling angry, but ultimately we have to understand that this is, it's still, if the government, the BMA, the resident doctors, we all need to work together towards patient care, essentially. So if he wants to take patient care seriously, he's going to have to offer something better than what he has done so far.
But wouldn't the challenge be back that if you're taking patient care seriously, you should stand by the oath that you make, which is to put patients and their safety and well-being first, and therefore actually not be seeking to strike and asking for unrealistic demands, but staying in the hospitals to make sure that no one has any cancellations of any of their operations or procedures that they have already booked in?
The strikes were announced several weeks ago now, and the conversation was happening even before that. The government has had plenty of notice, essentially, to fill the slots for the strikes, essentially. And I want to say that what's the alternative? If you're not paid fairly as a worker, you're going to get burnt out. I remember working in the hospitals. I remember how strenuous that felt. I could not wait till I would clock watch the entire time. I still do that. It feels nauseating, the level of stress and pressure you're working under. And that is down to the fact that there isn't enough staff. And I'm talking, this is before COVID. So we keep using COVID as a blanket for an excuse for everything. But actually, even before COVID, we were not meeting minimum staffing requirements. A fresh doctor out of medical school, I was thrust into the wards with absolutely no idea what to do, a minimal amount of training, and you had to cope. If you don't swim, you sink. That's just how it is. You are literally coping with life and death. So any mistake you make weighs on you. It can cost a life.
But isn't that the same in any profession? People have to make decisions, sink or swim. That could be the same for a teacher, for example, when it comes to trying to impart knowledge. And that could be someone in our armed forces, a police officer. They all go through those same strains and stresses too. Why should doctors somehow be treated any differently? You talk about having time to plan. Well, it's been reported here in the Times that consultants are going to be paid up to £313 an hour to cover the 50,000 resident doctors expected to strike.
And that is so unfair, don't you think? And think about just how avoidable this could have been had the resident doctors, who are just asking for £4 extra per hour. They're currently, the base pay level resident doctor gets currently paid around £18 an hour. They're simply asking for about £22 an hour. And the NHS is already paying non-medically trained starting staff, physician's assistants, £24 an hour. The money is there. And although you mentioned about resident doctors, all jobs being quite pressured, I would argue, and I started working in the respiratory ward pre-COVID, I would argue the pressure of literally knowing that someone's oxygen level can drop below 80, 85, and that person could literally die on my watch, I would argue someone's oxygen is dependent on a resident doctor, effectively. So just compare the sort of stakes here and just how much pressure that can be feeling for someone. And if someone dies, the amount of paperwork, amount of distress that causes, not just at an emotional level, but from a legal point of view as well. We are carrying so much legal burden on our heads, essentially. That stress is constantly there of potentially causing harm whilst we're on shift, essentially.
Well, final Well, I understand your points. I still think that, you know, you say £4 more per hour. That's still got to be found. That means £4 more per hour not going on frontline services. But look, the last thing for me is Sir Keir Starmer's written in the Times today, and he's written this: most people do not support these strikes. They know they will cause real damage. Behind the headlines are the patients whose lives will be blighted by this decision. The frustration and disappointment of necessary treatment delayed, and worse, late diagnosis and care that risk their long-term health. It is not fair on patients. It's not fair on NHS staff who will have to step in to cover for those taking action, and it's not fair on taxpayers. These strikes threaten to turn back the clock on progress we have made in rebuilding the NHS over the last year, choking off the recovery. What would you say back to Sir Keir Starmer if you were in a room with him?
I just love how he likes to scapegoat doctors for the state of the NHS, completely absolving any accountability on his own part. And the government, all MPs have been getting 12 pay rises in the last few years. And what have they shown for it so far? Are you happy with the fact that, you know, when you look outside of your house, do you see your bins being cleared on time? Do you see your streets clean anymore? We're talking about how many millions and billions that has been spent on these immigrant hotels. And yet he makes out that it's just the resident doctors. And there's no coverage at all about the days we're not striking and the deaths, the excess deaths that are happening on every Christmas and weekends. And the, you know, we were talking just not long ago about patients worried about whether they'd, have to have long queues in A&E. When is there not a long queue in A&E? My patients don't even want to go to A&E when they absolutely need to because there's such long queues in A&E. Doctors aren't striking on those days.
Basha, may I just quickly say, it comes across, you have a lot of confidence in West Streeting. I don't get the same sense in Sir Keir Starmer. Do you think Sir Keir Starmer is more of a problem? Does he need to go? Should he get out of the way? Let's let West Streeting have 10 Downing Street instead.
I would not envy his job at all. It's a very difficult job that Keir Starmer has. Equally, I have met him and interviewed him as well.
Do you trust him?
We had the same conversation about resident doctor strikes, and I personally don't care who's in power at this point. I just want to go to work and be paid fairly for it and not have to consider options abroad, which, by the way, I am. And people are going to be really angry and furious about this, but I have to pay my bills. In order to pay off my mortgage, I need to think about what's best for me.
But do you trust Sir Keir Starmer, Basha? Do you trust him? Do you think he can... Is he the right person? Do you trust him to sort this out? Or do you think it's only West Streeting who's going to be able to get a way forward on this?
Well, who is West Streeting without Keir Starmer, first of all? They're obviously part of the same party. Do I think Keir Starmer... Well, I don't think any of his other party members are any more reliable than him. Saying that, when the last government was leaving, I was pretty frustrated with them as well. I think there's general things about the country that needs to be overhauled. Am I unhappy as a citizen? Yes, I am. So I didn't vote for Keir Starmer, so that's that.
Oh, could we ask who you did vote for?
Well, at the time, I actually did vote for Rishi Sunak, but he wasn't my local MP, so I didn't have any say in that, per se. But Rishi Sunak, towards the end, he did have me winning over a little bit. I know the Conservative Party is completely out of the picture now, so perhaps different government.
Well, I think that's great to clarify, actually, because I think a lot of people have just assumed you were of the politics of the left. And it's actually refreshing to hear someone who says, no, I haven't been, and I was convinced by Rishi Sunak, and I'm now, sadly, not as convinced as I once was about this government maybe too. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Basha, for joining us today. Really great call. And listeners, you can tell us what you think. 0344 499 1000. Text the word talk at the start of your message to 87222 and message us on X at talkTV. Do you agree with Dr. Basha? Do you think that actually it's just £4 an hour? We should be more chilled about it. Take a call and let's see you shortly.
So the police have basically banned anybody from going outside the Bell Hotel to demonstrate in any way, shape or form. Is that right?
To be fair, this is the first I've heard of it. We had a planned demonstration this evening,
right,
which has been planned for the past week. The problem is that these demonstrations have been taken over by a political agenda, by left and right, which is absolutely ridiculous. Right. This is not anything, this is not a political fight.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back, everybody. Me, Jonathan Gullis, sitting in for the great Alex Phillips here on the home of common sense. That is Talk, and we've had many calls and texts all talking about the doctor's strike. And Dr. Basher, I thought, did a great job putting the case and making it sound like it's earning £4 extra an hour. When I asked her what she was earning, though, she was very coy to say that it's about 50. It seemed to be over 50,000 after tax. I wonder how much you have to be earning to still take home over £50,000 a year after tax. I would suggest that salary would be multiple times above the average salary of a UK resident, and that 29% pay rise is seemingly just completely and utterly unrealistic, when, as James Hill from The Spectator told us earlier, 2 in every £3 that has been given by this Labour government to the NHS has simply gone on covering salaries. That's around 20 billion out of the 30 billion covering salary increases, not being spent on new technology, not being spent on improving hospital buildings, and not being spent on making sure that you get quicker access to your NHS. Now, Stuart from Wigan is on the line, and he wants to tell us his view. Hello, Stuart.
Hiya, Jonathan. Can I just say quickly that I'm fully behind the protesters at Epstein and the farmers, and I think the farmers should be a bit more proactive, and I'm quite willing to go without food to back them. But back to the doctors. I've only just stopped crying listening to her. I really have. It's sickening. She come out with a statement there that the NHS wouldn't be anything without them. The NHS isn't anything with them. That's the issue. You want to rise? Let's go for performance-based, eh?
Yeah.
Let's see, you know what let's go for a performance-based rise. Let's do that. I've no time for them whatsoever at all. Get back to work.
Well,
you know what I mean? I'm a wagon driver. There's as much stress with me. I'm driving around something that could kill multiple people any 1 minute. You know what I mean? We deliver food, we deliver building gear, we deliver everything. People would still be living in mud huts and catching the food if it weren't for people like me. So, yeah.
Well, Stuart, by the way, if Ed Miliband gets his way, he'll drive maybe an electric wagon. How do you feel about that? Or is that also total nonsense and for the birds?
Nonsense. Absolute rubbish. Not a chance.
Stuart, I like you a lot. By the way, my grandfather was a HGV driver after his time in the Marine, so I'm glad to hear someone like yourself who does a similar career. Thank you so much, Stuart, those not having any of it when it comes to these junior doctor strikes. We go next to George in Yorkshire.
Good morning. Sorry, good afternoon, Jonathan.
Don't worry, I get confused too. Good afternoon. How are you, Stuart? George, sorry. There we go. I knew I get it wrong.
I'm all confused by the time. It's all because of that doctor coming on and offering so much BS that and she came out with some analogy about during lockdown and all that. If it wasn't for the doctors monitoring the oxygen levels, that these patients would die, and it's critical that these doctors do that. Just to put you in a picture, Jonathan, I was in the Royal Air Force for 29 years. My son serves.
Thank you for your service, sir.
And my son serves in the service at the moment. And
thank you for his as well.
During our working time, we service aircraft on a daily basis, topping up oxygen in order that our pilots are flying out into a war zone to support and save our country. So she's not doing anything different to what the engineers do on aircraft. But she's asking for a 20-odd% pay rise, and what the armed forces are getting this year, just the basic 4.5%, if that.
And as you know, the armed forces can't even protest, right? You can't strike. You just have to lump it and deal with it.
And that's the way it's been forever. And the armed forces still go on with the job and say, yeah, it's all right, we can do it. They still moan, of course they do, but we go on with the job. We don't walk out and leave the country to the mercy of people like Putin and all these others.
Well, thank you very much for your service. Thank you for your son's service, and thank you for that call. And I completely agree with you. We've got Anne in, I think it's Gwynedd. I think I've said that correctly. I'll get corrected if not. Who I think is an actual, or is got a view on the resident doctors. Sorry, Anne. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you.
I hope I said your surname correctly. Apologies. Sorry, where you live. Sorry, correctly. If not, I apologise.
I've just listened to the doctor.
Yes.
And I've had a 25 pence rise per week in my pension, and we've had our winter fuel allowance taken away from us. So if you balance 25 pence per week against £4 an hour, I'll leave it open to you.
Well, I think you make a really great point. How did you feel when she was trying to frame it? Because it sounds reasonable when someone says £4 an hour, but no one's saying how many hours. And most doctors, we assume, are working 12 hours a day, let's say 5 days a week. As you know, that all adds up, right? And as you say, it's a pensioner who's paid into the system all your life through work. And now you're suddenly being expected to, and actually with Labour freezing tax thresholds as we expect in the upcoming budget, those people, even on just the state pension, will be entering for the very first time the 20p tax rate, therefore seeing further erosion of their pension. How does it make you feel when she says £4 an hour? Is that reasonable? Are we being unreasonable in thinking that that's not, that doctors deserve it?
Well, I must say, our doctors locally are brilliant. I can't fault them, but I think they're being greedy, and we're having to go into our savings every week to make ends meet now.
I'm really sorry to hear that, Anne. What's the particular pressure? Is it energy costs that you're facing, or just inflation in terms of food prices too?
It's everything. It's everything.
And do you think this government's offering answers to those questions?
Everything. Sorry?
Do you feel this Labour government's answering those concerns of yours? Do you feel that they're setting out a path for change?
No, I don't think they're interested at all. I'm too much of a lady to say what I think as Keir Starmer, I'm afraid.
Well, that's great to hear, Anne. Thank you so much for your call. We've got Sean in Essex before we go to the break. Hello, Sean. How are you?
Yeah, I'm fine, Jonathan. How are you?
I'm good, thank you very much. What's your view on these doctor strikes?
Well, very similar to what the people have been saying previously. I mean, what I got from the doctor was it's characteristic of being indoctrinated in university and then coming into the real world to work and saying, oh, we can't do this, oh, we can't do that, we're so stressed. Why does money mean that if someone dies on her watch, it's any different? It doesn't make any sense to me.
I think you are speaking for a lot of people there, Sean. Thank you so much for your call. Really do appreciate that. We have to quickly go to the next break to make sure we get our next guest the time that he deserves. We're going to be speaking to Rick Gates, who's the former deputy campaign manager for Donald Trump when he ran for president in 2016. We're talking about US politics because President Trump is due to land tonight, I think it is, in Scotland to have some personal time to inspect his golf courses, although we're told he's also going to be meeting with the Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, and the Scottish First Minister, John Sweeney. That I would love to be in the room to see. I can't imagine those two exchanging many hugs anytime soon. So make sure you're tuning in. 0344 499 1000. You can WhatsApp on that number too. Text with the word talk at the start of your message to 87222 and follow us and message us on X at talkTV. We'll see you.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back, everybody. We're getting near the end of the show. You may be relieved to see the back of me in half an hour, but I hope you won't be. And obviously, you're going to have more great stuff to listen to here on the home of common sense. That is Talk. And blimey, the switchboard is lighting up with a doctor strike. Dr. Basher has got people thinking. I suspect they're not always as sympathetic as she may like them to be, but it's certainly useful to have had her perspective. If you want to call 0344 499 1000, text in the word Talk at the start of your message to 87222, and follow us on messages on X at talkTV. Well, we are going to take a handbrake. Oh, there we go. I'll get my words out of my mouth. Turn now to US politics. And I'm delighted to be joined by Rick Gates. He is the former deputy campaign manager for President Donald Trump back in 2016. Mr. Gates, how are you?
Jonathan, great to be with you this morning.
No, really appreciate it, and loving the flag, by the way. God almighty, I wish we had more people in this country doing that kind of thing. If I can start, first of all, with President Trump's visit to Scotland. There's a bit of people. There's people questioning it, right? They're saying he's coming over in a personal capacity. Yeah, he is having official meetings with Sir Keir Starmer, the Prime Minister, and he's meeting with John Sweeney, the First Minister of Scotland. Isn't that technically sort of breaking the rules, or he's coming to promote his golf courses? Isn't that just abusing his position of power to try and shamelessly make a quick buck off some more of the British people?
Oh, absolutely. I don't think so at all. And in fact, this is an incredible opportunity for Scotland. It is very rare for the president to take any time of, quote, personal trip. Usually, in the United States, he'll go to Mar-a-Lago or Bedminster in New Jersey during the summer. But this is actually one of a kind. The last time I think the president visited the golf course was back in 2016 during the campaign. Look, it's very important for him. His entire life has been built around golf courses and hotels. And I know that he's very excited about the prospect of the new golf course in Scotland. So I think this is a rare opportunity, a great moment for the country of Scotland. And yeah, as typical with the president, he is doing kind of a working trip. And he is going to be meeting with a number of your leaders, including your prime minister.
How do you think he'll react to some of the criticism? Look, we know that the Scottish National Party, which John Sweeney is the leader of and the First Minister of Scotland, is not exactly a pro-Trump party. In fact, they will do everything they can to try and politicise his visit. There are some people, local activists, mocking President Trump by renaming his course Twinned with Epstein Island, obviously in relation to some of the news that's been going on around Jeffrey Epstein, which I will ask a few questions on later if you don't mind. Do you think it will matter to him? And does it even matter if the American people see that kind of hostility maybe displayed from a few people?
No, I don't think so at all. I think, if you look at the divisions within our own country, we're kind of used to it now. This is, the third cycle that President Trump, has been involved in presidential politics. It kind of goes along with the territory. I suspect if they were a Democratic president, there would be some sort of protests as well. I think the protests are specific to U.S. issues as opposed to the individual. Although I think President Trump certainly, has caused people in Europe and other places to raise some of their concerns about these issues. But I think, from all the reports that I've seen and talked to other individuals, the individuals in Scotland, your first minister and your prime minister are going to use this as an opportunity to talk about, meaningful issues to them. I know there's going to be a lot of talk about the U.S.-UK trade deal specifically, and I'm sure that, some of the issues that like Gaza and others will, come up. And what a rare opportunity, again, to talk to the president about these. I think the, idea that somebody, from Scotland specifically would have this opportunity is very rare.
Talking about, obviously, where you said we expect there may be some discussion on Gaza, although, interestingly, we never hear the Prime Minister have that as part of his readouts from meetings he's had previously. We see that your Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, has put out quite a punchy message on X, saying United States strongly rejects Emmanuel Macron's plan to recognise a Palestinian state at the UN General Assembly. That's in September, that meeting is planned for. This reckless decision only serves Hamas propaganda and sets back peace. It is a slap in the face of the victims of October 7th. That's been going obviously viral. This is after Monsieur Macron, the president of France, outlined his intention for France to be the first country in the Western civilized society to recognise the state of Palestine. Sir Keir Starmer writing very punchy language, getting very close to saying he wants to see that happen, but insisting a ceasefire must be agreed first. What's your take on what Secretary Rubio has done? Is he right in saying that Monsieur Macron is making the wrong decision here?
Oh, absolutely. And I think most Americans actually would agree with, Secretary Rubio's comments. I think, what is going on in terms of the peace process and the stalled talks by Hamas, with our special envoy, Steve Witkoff, announcing that Hamas basically just doesn't want to stop fighting, is a huge indication of why you do not want to do something like this. Whether President Macron felt, this is necessary, I think the timing was very bad in the face of Hamas kind of walking away from the peace talks. It doesn't give Hamas a lot of credibility. It makes it very, very difficult for other even partners in the region, Saudi Arabia, UAE, and others, to really see where President Macron can make a very credible statement like this and back it. Look, I understand President Macron in France, they have obviously, I think the largest Jewish population of any European country, as well as Muslim population. So he's got a very difficult balancing act in his country. But at the end of the day, even if he takes it to the UN, I don't think many of the other European countries will follow suit. And certainly if he tries to raise it as a UN security resolution, it'll absolutely fail.
Well, I hope so too, because I totally agree with you that this is a bad decision. It feels like an attempt to play to a domestic political market to prop himself up. We know how deeply unpopular in the polling Monsieur Macron is, and I don't know if you saw the scenes, but before he came over for his state visit to the United Kingdom, we suddenly saw images. It just happened to be a TV camera was there when they punctured one of these small boats in shallow waters before being able to take off, and subsequently we've never seen any footage since his return. Out on that state visit, obviously Monsieur Macron was allowed to speak to both the House of Commons and House of Lords, the British Parliament. Ironically, the day after the British Parliament goes on holiday, as it were, again for what we call conference recess, President Trump's state visit begins. Is it a slap in the face for President Trump to not have been allowed to address both houses like some of his predecessors, such as Barack Obama, was allowed to do?
Oh, absolutely not. I don't think so at all. And again, I mean, this is, a look at a personal trip. This was designed around what he was going to attend in terms of the golf courses. So I don't think it's a slap in the face at all. And in fact, I think, other presidents, have not, in every country they visited, have not always spoken, into the parliaments or the representative bodies in some cases. So I think it actually saves them a trip down to London at this time.
I think it is rude, actually. You know what? I'm one of those, maybe I'm out of touch, Rick, with what the US public think, but I feel President Trump should have been given the honour to stand and talk to our parliamentarians on the steps like many before him. Can I just quickly ask, Rick, we saw some quite incredible footage yesterday. President Trump went to go visit the Fed Reserve, where Jerome Powell, who's head of that, was standing side by side. President Trump was then saying that he expected this renovation work, I think is going on, to come to around $3.1 billion. We saw the Jerome Powell shaking his head quite furiously and then interjecting and then claiming that President Trump didn't basically understand what he was on about because he was adding in a building that's already been built and the cost was still around the £2.5 billion mark. And then obviously President Trump saying, using that moment on camera to then say, when are you going to start cutting interest rates? We know there's a lot of tension between these two. I sort of love to have an assessment on that interaction and what you thought of it and what Jerome Powell in the right or in the wrong. And then just actually quickly update us, what is the sort of economic picture? President Trump's bill was heavily criticised, the One Big Beautiful Bill, of cost, having a huge amount of increase in spending come with it. But I'm keen to know, actually, is the economic news showing that President Trump's doing the right thing?
Yeah, most of us in the U.S. are pretty amused by the visit President Trump and Jerome Powell to the Federal Reserve building site. In fact, as most people know, this is Donald Trump's, kind of bread and butter. This is his life, his buildings. And so, he's known this process, this work, all his life. I mean, when we were on the campaign, I had the opportunity to visit some of his hotels that were being built, and he would identify, things in the buildings, things that needed to be fixed. I mean, it was very interesting to watch. So I think this was very uncomfortable for Jerome Powell for multiple reasons. Most people would think, yes, the president has been calling for him to be fired or for, even to be removed. But in this environment, when you're talking about building plans, budgets, construction costs, I mean, this is Donald Trump's, strike zone right here. And so I'm sure Jerome Powell felt very uncomfortable. I think the most interesting thing for Americans is a couple of years ago when Jerome Powell was talking about the budget for the Federal Reserve building before our congressional body and talking about the budget and what was going to be in it. And he was asked several questions about, elevators and different things that seemed to be, not in line with what the American people would expect, excessive costs with the building, and he denied all those. And then now we're finding out that some of those are in fact going to be in the building. So I think he was probably uncomfortable because he was defending some very, very unscrupulous spending. And yes, I mean, COVID, of course, increased the price. But for the American people, spending $1.9 billion originally and now almost up to $3 billion, that's absolutely ridiculous. And I think that's what Donald Trump wanted to showcase yesterday.
And then final one from me, sorry, Rick, is that, look, the Jeffrey Epstein stuff seems to be really looming large over actually what a lot of President Trump is trying to do. There are a lot of talks that the Department of Justice, some are accusing of helping cover up the fact that President Trump is named in some of the Epstein files. We've seen, obviously, there's been internal disagreements between Pam Bondi, the Attorney General, and Kash Patel, the Director of the FBI. I'm just keen to, and obviously we've even have some of the sort of MAGA base saying that they feel betrayed that President Trump didn't deliver his promise to disclose all the Epstein files. As a veteran of Donald Trump's campaigns, how serious is it when MAGA turns on Trump himself?
Oh, no, it can absolutely be serious. And you've seen a couple instances where MAGA, has gone against the president and they've made it known. And the president has shifted his position sometimes. I think, look, there's two issues in the U.S. that are absolutely dominating, our media, the Epstein story and then obviously Russiagate. And both those stories are kind of, colliding with each other in terms of what Pam Bondi at the Department of Justice is going to do, because a lot of the actions are on her plate. I think over the last week, the president's calls for releasing grand jury transcripts and testimony was a huge move for MAGA, and I think realigned them in terms of getting the information out. We'll have to see what comes out of that. In terms of the president's name being mentioned, I think this is where, people are especially in the liberal media in the U.S., are making a big deal. The president's name had already been disclosed, that it was in the file. So that is not new information. I think, what people are missing is that there are going to be a lot of names mentioned. That doesn't necessarily mean they had anything to do with Jeffrey Epstein. Not just President, President Trump, but there's President Clinton. There's many other people involved that we don't know what specifically their involvement is because there hasn't been enough information released. I do think the American people deserve 100% transparency in this issue, though.
And President Trump's been very clear that he denies any wrongdoing. In fact, he actually talks about the fact that he told Jeffrey Epstein where to go and kicked him out of Mar-a-Lago over, I think, a business deal at the time, and that they didn't have any real relationship, I think, since the early 2000s. And as you say, Jeffrey Epstein having been someone that's been obviously lots of names aligned to it, but President Trump obviously denies any wrongdoing whatsoever, and as you say, has now recently called for Pam Bondi to release some of the transcripts so that the more information can be good. Thank you so much, Rick, for joining us there. It's Rick Gates, former deputy campaign manager for Donald Trump in his 2016 presidential election. We're going to be going to a break. 0344 499 1000 if you want to call or WhatsApp us. 87222 with the word talk at the start of your text if you want to text us, and follow us and message us on X at talkTV. We'll see you soon.
So the police have basically banned anybody from going outside the Bell Hotel to demonstrate in any way, shape or form. Is that right?
To be fair, this is the first I've heard of it. We had a planned demonstration this evening,
right,
which has been planned for the past week. The problem is that these demonstrations have been taken over by a political agenda, by left and right, which is absolutely ridiculous. This is not anything, this is not a political fight.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back, everybody. Me, Jonathan Gullis, sitting in for the great Alex Phillips here on the home of Common Sense. That is Talk. And soon I'll be joined by Ian Collins, who's taking you from 1 p.m. to 4 p.m. with his fantastic show. We'll have him in to ask what he's going to be looking at. Let's get to our last guest of the day. His name is Gareth Angel Thompson. He is the CEO and founder of Kingdom Wrestling UK. This is about the big story that broke yesterday, that very tragedy Hulk Hogan, I'm sure many of our listeners will know, having grown up in worldwide wrestling, sadly has passed away in his late 70s. First of all, Gareth, how are you? Thank you for joining us.
I'm good, yeah. Thank you for having me on. It's obviously a sad day for wrestling fans, but Hulk Hogan has a legacy, and it's fantastic to be able to talk about that with you here today.
Oh, apologies, it was 71, not late 70s. I just got corrected in my ear. Apologies for adding years onto his age. But look, Hulk Hogan, for me, was a huge star of wrestling. Certainly when I was being brought up, was one of those that was on my TV screens alongside British greats like Big Daddy and Giant Haystacks. I mean, just what kind of legacy do you think Hulk Hogan is leaving?
Well, I think it's a mixed legacy. As late in his life, he was quite controversial with some things. But if you go back to the 80s and 90s, and even the early 2000s, Hulk Hogan is a household name. He is synonymous with professional wrestling. You see so many people talking about say your prayers, eat your vitamins, 24-inch pythons, what you gonna do, brother? He's featured in media across the world. Like even a Dragon Ball Z episode has a caricature of
that the most recent history of Hulk Hogan could somehow leave a black mark over, as you say, his wrestling career? Or do you think most people can look past maybe the flaws of the man and look at the person they saw in the ring that brought them so much joy? Thank you so much for joining us today to share in that very special legacy that is Hulk Hogan. May he rest in peace. Let's go back to some callers now, because we've had many and it's all about doctor strikes. Let's go to Alan, who is in Hull. Hello, Alan.
Hi, good afternoon. I just wanted to give you a quick call regarding the junior doctor who hung up, I believe it was Bash Mukherjee.
Yes.
Her name. One thing that struck me from the very outset, she never set out anything to say how this pay increase would benefit any of the patients.
Yes.
That was clearly not on her agenda. Also, somebody who can say that a pay rise of just £4 an hour clearly doesn't need £4 an hour more. It'll probably buy another Mercedes or something. My thoughts are that junior doctors do a very valuable role, and I believe once they've fully qualified, etc., they should have their tuition fees refunded. I think that's more than reasonable. However, I think the whole idea of holding the country to justice for money all of the time is just unacceptable. And personally, if I was in charge of the NHS...
The state to the tune of 20%. Why not reduce that by 10%, and we can have a 10% pay increase instead, while still getting at 10% pension contributions, probably in some cases 2 to 3 times more than what you would get if you're working in the private sector. Let's talk about how we can maybe make it that if you fully qualify and retain working in the NHS for X amount of years, that you're instead able to have your student debt written off as a way of trying to encourage people to stay, rather than, like you say, being held to ransom. Let's go to Sue in Kent, who's also got a view on doctor strikes.
Hello. I just wanted to say really that I'm absolutely disgusted with the doctors. They go on as if they're worked off their feet all the time. That's the impression they like to give out. But I don't think they are. I've had my brother in the hospital where we had to take him out because he wasn't getting the treatment for his need, terminal cancer. I had to take my dad out because he wasn't getting the care. We were washing them ourselves, taking them to the toilet ourselves. They're not rushed off. Have you ever seen a nurse run? No, I have never seen anybody run. They don't rush anywhere. And when you're there and you're wanting a nurse, you call and call and call. I've seen old folk just left in their beds, absolutely distressed, and nobody comes. So I don't believe they're rushed off their feet, and I think they're being really greedy. They have no empathy, they're self-absorbed, and that's all they think about, themselves, and yet they're supposed to be in a calling. Rubbish.
Thank you so much. That's Sue from Kent. What a strong, powerful intervention that was. Again, feeling no sympathy, having seen the quality of care her own first-hand, and offensively feeling that the NHS hasn't been stepping up for patients, so why should patients continue to pay extortionate amounts of tax in order to fund it? And then our final caller, Steve in Leeds, who's also on about doctor strikes. Hello, Steve.
Morning, Jonathan. Afternoon. Yes, just a quick one on the doctors. We keep getting told that the NHS is full of foreign workers, which is why we need to employ them, because we can't find people in this country. So all these foreign doctors that are working in the NHS are working there because they're paid far more than they are in the country of origin. So they're not underpaid. They're actually paid more than they would if they went back home. So this idea that all the doctors will leave and go to Canada or Australia, well, they wouldn't. They've already come from India, Pakistan, Bangladesh and the Philippines because our wages are so high in the first place.
Steve, if I could just push back a bit there. I think Basha was trying to refer to the idea that this would be British-trained doctors are looking to move abroad. She said herself she was looking, and that if we don't give a pay settlement in the view that she believes is necessary, that we will lose British doctors to other nations, and isn't that a shame?
Yeah, but the problem is, Jonathan, that's not true. If doctors have been so poorly paid for the last 5 years, they would have already left if they could. They wouldn't have stayed around in the hope of a pay increase of 29% in 5 years' time. They'd have already buggered off. So it tells me that these doctors don't want to go and work abroad because, let's be honest, if the pay's that good, you'd have gone already.
Well, thank you so much, Steve, there from Leeds. Lots of you have been calling and texting in about what's going on with today's junior doctors' strike. We've got some texts coming in as well about it. We've got here the doctor talking about the oxygen levels. What about the CSWS? Sorry, I don't know what that is. That are low paid, band 3, that take the observations and tell the doctor, I drive an emergency ambulance daily. I have responsibilities, but we are a team. Well, meant to be anyway. That's Charlotte. Thank you so much. Well, guess what, ladies and gents? Mr. Ian Collins is going to be guiding you from 1 p.m. to 4 p.m. and you know how great that show is. Ian, what are you going to be discussing?
Well, I haven't got a placard in hand. I did walk past Guy's Hospital on the way in deliberately just to see if because I know Mike was looking in on it this morning. There was nothing going on there. Couldn't see anything at all. So whether they've gone for lunch, I don't know. Couldn't see anybody. With this passion of the doctor's strike.
Indeed.
You know, didn't manifest outside one of the biggest hospitals in the world.
We had a resident doctor who voted for the strike. She was quick to this. It's only £4 an hour extra. It's only £4 more. Why isn't that not a reasonable thing? I mean, I would argue that obviously when you add up, it's 29% pay increase on top of the 28% increase.
On top of that.
Well, and the fact that James Hill gave us a stat earlier, every 2 of the £3 this Labour government, about 30 billion in total so far, they've given in additional funding. 20 billion just going to cover pay rises. How is that meant to improve the state of our NHS?
And this was the black hole, of course, originally, wasn't it? The black hole, the 22 billion quid included their Labour's pay rises for doctors. So they got it, and now they want another. I mean, it doesn't make any sense at all. I don't think there's any. Have you had anybody call in with sympathy for the?
No, I've looked desperately, and no, I haven't had anyone sympathy. Some people saying let's have a conversation around pension contribution. Let's have a conversation around student debt and whether that could be written off. Let's have a sensible conversation about that rather than holding the country to ransom.
Absolutely right. There might be other ways of doing it, but I mean, the idea that doctors aren't ultimately paid very well is nonsense. Of course, they're paid very well. They've got pensions that, you know, even an MP's pension doesn't match what you'd get as a doctor.
And that's pretty good going, I can tell you that.
It's not bad, is it?
And out of interest, what else are you looking at to cover today?
Shoplifting, of course. Big problem with shoplifting. Huge rises. The Sun covering that exclusive on even those from Migrant hotels going out. Guy, we'll do a bit of